The Michael Waddell Podcast is presented by Spandau Arms in partnership with Folds of Honor and Cigars International. Be sure to like and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts.
Bro, and that's what I mean, this is a complete turkey nerd out deal, and that's what I wanted this to be. And obviously, I know we're appealing to a certain audience. Obviously, you know, we love turkey hunting. A lot of our audience loves turkey hunting, and you're right. The passionate turkey hunter, you don't find many turkey hunters. Once they are hooked on it, this part of it comes naturally. Man, I've been excited. First of all, Patrick Wightman, thank you for coming down and joining us on the podcast. I've been super excited about this conversation because we had a chance to sit and talk with old Eddie Salter. I'm a diehard turkey hunter, and so this is a first for me to have a chance to sit down. Even back, the last time I had a really chance to sit down and talk personally was Dr. Kinnemer years ago. And first of all, I got to even correct myself. I said Patrick Wightman, but Dr. Patrick Wightman. And I wanted to kind of preface this, if anybody's listening, if you're at all into turkey hunting or really habitat in anything wildlife, this conversation is going to be good. So don't go away, because there's so much, whether you're hunting on a lease, whether you got your own personal private ground, or hunting public. Patrick inevitably has dedicated your life to wildlife biology in general, but from research to figuring out some of these situations that we're facing, it seems it's always evolving. And I want to real quick, a couple things is to kind of, in Sean Ryan's sense of how he does it, kind of let people understand a little bit, know about your biography and what you have done. And I'm just going to simply read this because this is amazing to accomplish this at your age. But Patrick, or Dr. Patrick Wightman, you joined the NWTF as an organization's new National Director of Wild Turkey Research and Science. This has been a new established position that marks the first time since the 1980s that the National Wild Turkey Federation has dedicated a senior leadership role exclusively to overseeing the organization's wild turkey research portfolio and scientific partnerships. And for you, you said it's obviously a dream come true. You dedicated your life to this. And here's what's really cool. You started your undergraduate degree from Paul Smith College, and then you ended up had to be a culture shock, down to LSU to get your master's degree at Louisiana State University. And then you just finished up your doctorate several years ago at the University of Georgia in Athens. And so obviously when you look at just what you've done in dedicating to biology, and I thought that this was even cool, not only did you study turkey research, but there at LSU, you had a chance to work and study with Brett Collier, who's an OG of turkey research. And then at UGA, you got Dr. Mike Chamberlain up there, that another OG. Then you look that obviously you had a chance to work some with Dr. Kinnemer, who was at NWTF for years. And so when you look at this, and then now, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've also been a professor at UGA. Is that right?
Yeah,
Patrick?
I was a professor for just shy of 2 years before I took the position with the NWTF. So yeah, that was kind of what I transitioned from, was coming from academia, professorship, and now working as the National Director of Wild Turkey Research and Science. So.
Man, that is so cool. And also right before we get too crazy into this is like, I'm telling you, you can see my favorite podcast. One thing I wanted to do, and we've been doing this for every guest as a gift, is making sure we give somebody at least a cool gift that, if you got a lady in your life or wife or whatever, that they'll be excited about you coming home with it. So I want to hand you this. This is the Estate Chardonnay, which every lady I know that's tasted it, and even the men, if they can accept the fact that they do like Chardonnay. This Hilt Vineyard is amazing, and I want to give you a bottle of that to take home. Appreciate it. Right there is a gift from Outdoor Channel and the Michael Waddell Podcast. But
well, thanks, Michael. My wife will definitely appreciate it. I'm a wine. I'm not a connoisseur by any stretch of the imagination. When I drink wine, it's typically dark red, dry.
Yes,
that's just who I am. I'm not much of a buttery guy, but I can tell you right now, you just helped me coming into turkey season, smooth my wife out a little bit. I'll be on the road quite a bit.
Well, I'll make sure, and that's a good solid value of wine too, man. I looked at the prices on some of this, and I'm like, whoa, I need to save some of this for my doghouse, make my wife mad. I need to bring some of this out. But I tell you what I'll do, I'll make sure too. I got some other great in that same vineyard, it's out there. Mr. Cronky, who owns OSG out in Denver, Colorado. Obviously, he's worldwide with his business adventures, and he's a big into the wine vineyard stuff, and makes some of the finest wine out there. And so I got a nice bottle of red out there, some Merlot and some Cabernet. I can't even hardly pronounce it. I don't know either.
Yeah.
And also too, I'll make sure you leave too. I got you that pairs well with that good red wine. I got you a good cigar. I'll give you from Cigars International. So
perfect.
So far, man, it's been nice to where we got some good partners with the podcast that all the stuff that we like. Even though I don't drink a lot of wine, I love a cigar.
Yeah.
And so anytime you look at somebody like us in our profession, we get a lot done around a campfire.
Oh,
so
yeah.
every once in a while,
yeah.
a social hour, a cigar, and a cocktail sometimes can help you.
I love me a cigar and bourbon. I'm not gonna lie.
Yes,
there.
me too, man. I do too.
It's hard to beat, and conversation flows when you're in those situations. So
for sure. Well, first of all, man, obviously, I also read that you grew up hunting. You got your first turkey when you was 12 or 13.
Yeah, 13.
And so obviously, it seems like the academia side of what you jumped into from the research and the wildlife come from your passion of just being outdoors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where it all started, I would say, in the curiosity around wildlife and why they do what they do and seeing how they interact on the landscape. That's all because I was fortunate enough to have a dad that brought me right alongside him, ever since I was big enough to walk and traverse out into the woods with him. And so, I was fortunate there. Kind of my outdoor wildlife biology started there, kind of, the backyard biologist kind of thing, just me being out there as a kid and my parents allowing me to have the freedom to just go wander around in the woods. And I really appreciated that and definitely just became infatuated with wildlife and how they behaved, and specifically the wild turkey through hunting. Just always, I mean, I know you're ate up with it and passionate hunter. We're talking before this, and I am as well. It's just something about the bird, hearing that gobble, spending that time with friends and family. Like for me, there's not much better in life outside of my wife, kids, and family friends.
Yeah.
Like it's like to your point, it's driven a lot of my life decisions. And I was fortunate enough to luckily have some wildlife biologists that actually lived right down the road from me. And so I was spoiled in that sense where I got to go out and do deer captures, watch them shoot rocket nets over deer and be part of that. Got to track bears, go to, dens and things. So I was aware of the profession.
And this is all up in that New York area?
Yeah, Western New York. Yep.
I got you.
So Finger Lakes region, small town I graduated from was Prattsburgh, New York. But it's like, I think I had 36 kids in my high school class, so it was really small, very rural, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth, so to speak, in the outdoors. And so I was aware of the profession, and so kind of always knew I wanted to do that. And so that's why you already mentioned went to school at Paul Smith's to get my undergrad, and from there it just kind of, it's funny how the dominoes fall. You're sitting there reading kind of how my life has played out from a professional standpoint, and I've been lucky, man. I've been very fortunate. I've worked really hard, but also been very blessed and fortunate, like you mentioned, to study under those two guys, which in my opinion in the last 10 years anyways, or 15 during my heyday of doing research and getting my degree, those two are, when you're talking turkey research, I mean, those are the guys. So,
I know, man. I still see a lot of their, messaging and stuff. And what I find intriguing about where you're at is, you got the old guard, which when I say old guard, I don't say that in any negative sense. It's like, but you see it in everything out there from bass fishing. I saw that the young guy who just won the Bass Masters Classic, like literally just out of college. And I find it really cool when you look at the generations that's coming behind these different, I use to liken it to, say, the Hank Parkers, the Roland Martins. And now you see that they paved the roads, and you understand so much about that. And I think it's the same with biology, where Chamberlain, Kinnemer, and Brett, Mr. Collier down there, I mean, the things that they find, and now you kind of pick up and learn what they learned, and then also understanding, because we were talking before the podcast started too, about how even in every habitat or every landscape of geography where turkeys lived, or even the deer, the habitat's changing, whether it's construction or land development, introduction. There seems to be more disease out there. When you even look at going a step further into the crops and the different things, whether it's the chemicals that's sprayed. We're here doing this podcast in my farm here in a pecan orchard. Well, it's amazing when you really get into it. There's a lot of things that we're worrying about now that will be disease that get on these trees that didn't exist in the 30s and 40s when they're farming. I think the same thing holds true, where there's different predators, where there's different strains of viruses. And so it's really cool, I guess, in a nutshell, to see somebody like you that's dedicated from the standpoint of growing up there in Western New York, obviously chasing the hills and hollers, trying to run down a turkey or deer, and then obviously getting an opportunity to see some of these first research they were doing on the deer, to now look at the academia. And one thing I thought it interesting hearing your story coming from New York. Then your next stop was LSU down there with them Cajuns. Are you kidding me? How was that?
Talk about culture shock, man. But man, I loved every minute of it, and some of the best food in the country, in my opinion. And I'll travel back to Louisiana just for the food. But yeah, culture shock. SEC football, man. I had no idea. You know, NFL's big. Buffalo Bills. Fan.
Yes.
Within a couple hours of where I grew up, but college football just really wasn't that big. You know, you had Penn State, which was, 3 hours away or so from me. But man, then you get down there to LSU and it's like, that's life. I mean, that drives the entire city. It's like they shut it down.
It's like
they shut the city down. It's wild. And I'm a sports guy, sports nut, played sports all throughout high school, played basketball at Paul Smith during my undergraduate.
No
and
way.
so like I ate that. Like I ate that up. Like, 'cause I'm a competitive guy. I like sports. Like, and so yeah, immersing myself into that culture was fun. And then getting to move to UGA and the success they've had with the football program there. I've been blessed with SEC football. That's for
there's
sure.
no doubt. Yeah, you moved on to Georgia. Was LSU the first place you'd ever had some boudin?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Out of Billy's Boudin. Shout out to Billy's Boudin, because it is absolutely amazing. When I got it, it was on the backside of a gas station, and I was traveling to go. I believe we were either scouting ducks or trapping ducks with a master's student that was there and a technician. They were like, "Man, they were from the area, local. They're like, you got to get Billy's Boudin." I mean, we drove like 40 minutes out of the way, I remember, to go to this gas station, and the whole time I'm thinking, what are we doing here? Like, and then, once I had it, I realized that a pepper jack cheese stuffed boudin ball, there is hard to beat.
Exactly. I've learned in that Louisiana food, and we used to go down Chaffalot Basin every year and hunt. And obviously it was the most unbelievable food, like you said. I didn't know exactly what was in the recipes, and I just learned just to shut up and eat it, because I don't know that I wanted to know how they made boudin and what all went in it, or even their stews or their big, certain situations, things they would cook. But I just learned if you'd sit back and eat it, it made for a good hunt. It was always good. But on the biology side of things, obviously there's so much we can dig into. Obviously, specifically turkey, because it seems the turkeys, it seems that in the modern day, you got these insane ebbs and flows. And so obviously, from studying a little bit of what y'all's research has found, y'all have done some insane research, from GPS to how far these turkeys travel, to kind of weighing up against the percentages of nest predators that could get and bust up a nest. Obviously, some of these same things that apply to turkeys can apply to quail. I'm sure a variety of different species of animals, but even some of the myths. And I feel like, based on what y'all have learned, y'all have put aside some of the myth. One of the most important things is, I was telling you as well, it seems that people didn't realize how far turkeys traveled. How far what did y'all learn in some of that research and GPS information?
It varies a ton by individual too, which also makes things complicated.
Individual turkey.
Yeah, absolutely. So not every turkey behaves the same. And when we try to put an average to any sort of movement metric, what you see is you got big, what I call standard error, credible. That's just, the range of values and how precise your estimate is. And yeah, it's always large. There's a lot of individual variation, but on average, what we see is about 2,000 to 3,000 acres is your typical home range.
So if he's in the center, that 2,000 or 3,000 acres from that, call it a circle or a pie.
And obviously their home range is not circular or a square.
Right.
Like it's with contours, with landscape features, and all over the place. And so you can have 2,000 to 3,000 acres, and it might be really skinny and long, that bird might have, we might have trapped him in January down here on the south end of the property. And by the time summer and spring rolls around, he could be 5-6 miles north of there. It's just, and then you also have birds that when they bust out of that winter flock, don't go anywhere. They've got really tight core areas. I'm guessing those are mostly your dominant toms that have all the hens around them and they don't need to.
So they'll take back, almost similar to a, where in essence, my house is on the hill here. Obviously there's men and different things that visit, but at the majority of it, this is my place, essentially. I guess a turkeys take some of that same sense of things to where...
absolutely. I mean, there's dominance hierarchies built into these birds, meaning you have dominant toms, you've got subordinate, you know, satellite, you hear people, tell them, or the looker versus the strutter. Like, there's definitely different, personalities and social hierarchies, dominance hierarchies in these populations. And I think we haven't really looked at that because it's hard to determine who's who outside of like the movement stuff. Like I'm just assuming that's the man or the most dominant. But in order to really get an idea of that, you'd have to visualize all the birds in an area and watch them, see who's breeding the most kind of thing, who's all the hens coming to. And that's really hard to do in this part of the world, right?
Yeah,
because you can't see them that frequently, especially not across 3,000 acres snapshot or 2,000 acres or whatever. And so it's difficult, but there has been work done in Texas, more open stuff, rooster limited, and they can kind of watch that and show that, there are dominance structures and hierarchies and pecking orders, just like chickens. I see you got chickens out here in the yard, and it's the same thing.
I was sitting here with Eddie Salter, and Eddie is the epiphany of country, very rural living. Obviously, Eddie's got to be in his 70s now. One of my favorite turkey hunting personalities. I mean, knows so much about turkeys and the application of hunting. And so I noticed, it was about 2019 and 20, that my wife and I we got the chickens. And even though a chicken is not a turkey, you're right, I learned a lot just by watching these domesticated layers. And then she'd get roosters in here. My wife knew nothing about it. And I remember I'd tell her, like, she would think this little game rooster would be beautiful. And she'd put it in there with these silky roosters. And then you'd come back and the silky rooster is not hurt, but dead, where all, but they would live fine together in certain times of the year. But even like now we're in the spring of the year, those turkeys took on a whole different characteristic. The hens would be fighting, and my wife couldn't understand it. I was like, it just shows we're not living in peace, love, and happiness in this coop. They're fighting hard. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, my wife's learned this about just trying to get eggs and her joy of raising chickens and having a coop. But my whole time, my mind's spinning of like, I can't imagine the wild situation that these turkeys are going through, to where the hens have a dominant structure, the turkeys or gobblers are going through this situation or pecking order. And it's funny, you was talking about what y'all learned in the lookers and the strutters. I remember years ago, one of the first time I had a chance to hunt with Harold Knight, we was hunting this property. He said, look, man, when we get a shot, he said, if two turkeys come in, more than likely, he said, one's going to be strutting, one's going to be looking. He said, just so you know, I know y'all doing video. He said, but I'm going to kill the looker. And I said, if you think about it, 99% of all hunting shows, or really even if you're hunting alone with no camera, they're always killing the strutter. And Harold said that, hey, man, he said, look, we're going to kill that looker. That's going to be the subordinate. He said, now, I'm not saying that if we kill the strutter that this subordinate won't become the dominant of the situation. He said, but I know if I kill that subordinate, the looker, that strutting turkey will be gobbling in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? It was so true. I started paying attention, started doing that. And I would still say most of the time, your idea is the fact that the strutter is going to be the biggest, but I learned a lot of them, it seems to be brothers. How did y'all find any, is there a lot of those that will be brothers from a clutch or what's the proper word, or poults or grew up together essentially?
From a clutch, from a brood. And so, there's research on that, and we've looked at that recently in the last couple of years. And honestly, to our surprise, what we saw is that it varied. Like sometimes they were brothers. Like, so we were doing it, we'd catch them in the winter, and then we'd pay attention to who they hung out with during the spring. Then we had the genetics from drawing blood. And so we knew relatedness, right? We knew whether they were brothers, cousins, or whatnot. And the thought is that turkeys do what you call cooperative breeding, right? So meaning like in that situation where you've got the strutter and the looker, you would assume that those are brothers, and the looker, he's okay letting the strutter, get all the ladies, so to speak, and breed them because we're related and my genetics are moving on anyways. And if there's two of us, we're more showy, we can fight off others, we're more likely to secure breeding opportunities in general. But to our surprise, it was about a flip of a coin, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I know that it wasn't always. Like those birds that hung out together all year, not always brothers. That wasn't the case. And that kind of surprised us.
Would the age structure be similar, or did it vary? Sometimes a 2-year-old...
We don't know age, necessarily when we catch these birds. We know juveniles and we know adults.
Maybe big spur, long spur, that's about it.
And spurs, that's one of those myths. We can get down a rabbit hole here.
This is what's intriguing. Like I said, this is where so cool.
The spur side of it, that's interesting. You always hear people talking about aging birds by spur length. And really it can be done somewhat, but it's not accurate. Let's put it that way. Like you can take a look, if it's a 3/4 inch spur, most of the time that's probably a 2-year-old bird, but 70% of the time. So as long as you're you're okay with being wrong 30% of the time, which I'm not. I don't know, maybe I'm a perfectionist. Yeah. I don't ever pick up a turkey, look at a 3/4 inch spur and go, oh yeah, that's a 2-year-old, or oh yeah, that's a 3-year-old, because man, I've seen wild things. I've seen 2-year-olds get harvested where I banded that bird as a juvenile, and that bird get shot as a 2-year-old and have 1.25 spurs. Not once, multiple times.
And knowing it's a 2-year-old.
Yeah. So when we catch them as a juvenile, then we know how old they are.
So a juvenile being a Jake bird, first year turkey.
Yeah, and so you're looking at characteristics on their primary wings, how far the barring goes down, the notch in the tail fan. All of that will give you indicators when you put your hands on them during the winter of whether they're a juvenile, so a Jake, or an adult. But once they get to 2, there's really no way of knowing exactly how old they are unless you know who they were when they were a juvenile. So it's hard to tell with those pairs' age structures. But I would assume, I would assume that they're similar age or not. But it's an assumption. It's just that I think typically what you see, and part of the reason why it's not always a direct brother, is that turkeys undergo what you call brood amalgamation late in the summer, meaning broods mix together. So you have different females, that are raising broods separately, and then they begin raising them together.
So they flock back up in essence.
Correct. Yeah. And so you've got multiple eyes watching over these poults. And by the time you get out to like 28 days post-hatch and even beyond that, you start to get like 40, 45. Most of these birds, especially in brooding areas that are limited, meaning habitat, so they're all going to that early successional stuff. You see a lot of amalgamation. And so my this is just a hypothesis, though, is that some of these birds, they're being raised together as if they are brothers, right? Like they're growing up together, but they're just genetically not. And maybe that in and of itself is enough to cooperative breed together. But yeah, not always brothers, which was an interesting finding. And then the spur length thing for aging is definitely not spot on. There's another funny one. I say funny, but it's a bird that I just remember so much. I think it was number 12 or 13. It was right around in that band number on my master's project. And we caught him 3 years in a row. And the first year we caught him, he was an adult. So, and then by the time he had died, I know he was between 5 and 6 years old. Okay. And bird that just never moved anywhere. I think he was a dominant tom of the area. There was always transmitter hens around him. Well, he eventually got predated one year late in the summer. I don't know if he had a hunting injury or it was just an actual act of predation on our males. But he got predated. Picked him up, and the whole time when we first caught him, he had just under inch spurs and like an 8.5 inch beard. And when he died and I picked him up, same exact.
So he never really put on any. No. When you're saying adult, you knew he was at least 2 years old
when I caught him.
Exactly.
At least. So he was at least between 5 and 6 when he got predated. Hey, he could have been 7, 8. I don't really know. You know what I'm saying? I don't.
So if you would have yupped the turkey in, no history as a hunter, you would have said, I killed a nice 2-year-old.
Eight times out of 10, someone would pick that bird up and said, man, I got a nice 2-year-old here, not knowing that bird had been living in that holler for 5 years.
Oh man, you don't know how exciting and interesting even this to begin this, because keep in mind, we love turkey hunting. And I would say that we have a lot of turkey hunters listening to this, and even me, that's a huge learning. I have noticed that so many times, say, like my son and I just in South Florida, just the other day, we got a double. There was 3 gobblers come in, and so we ended up, he got one and I got one of the turkeys. And sure enough, one of the turkeys was strutting hard. I ended up getting the looker, and they were almost identical in spur length. And I remember looking, and it was an Osceola, obviously, and I've always noticed Osceolas seem to always have a little better spurs. I don't know if it's the habitat. I don't know if it's specifically the species. I've also noticed that a lot out in, say, those Rio country in Texas, that sandy country. You'll see some big, long spurred, very rarely, even though we have killed it, on average, a giant spur turkey, to me, in the southeast, or say up in your country where you grew up hunting northeast, 1.25 spur.
Oh, yeah.
Your instinct is like, this is a big old turkey.
Oh,
at least a 4 or 5 year old turkey.
Yeah.
But that actually kind of a little bit can knock that myth down to where there's still no guarantee outside of knowing.
And I'm not sitting here saying that there isn't some, like I said, 70% of the time you can use spur length. Now, once you get over an inch, though, I mean, at that point,
he's at least 3 or 4.
Yeah. And it's hard to know whether he's 3 or 6 or 7 or 8. Like at that point. And like I said, most of your 3/4 inch spur burrs are going to be 2 years. They got a 6.5 to 8 inch beard range, 3/4 inch spurs. 7 times out of 10, it may be 8. That is a 2-year-old bird.
And there's really nothing on a turkey like this. Reminds me of whitetail, where obviously you hear the term cull buck based on the rack, but they also have a very unique body posture and maturity within the frame of this deer. So even he might be toting a 100-inch, 8-point rack, that based on seeing him physically, that's probably a 5-year-old deer. A turkey still don't really have a display. Is there anything going? I remember, again, it was an Eddie Salter. I have noticed this. They always seem like an older turkey have a little more slender neck, and that's completely might be crazy.
That's a
I
new
don't
one
know.
For me, Michael. I hadn't.
Another thing Eddie said, and I remember I thought it was folklore, and I paid attention. He said that sometimes a Jake will have a little bigger track than, say, an old turkey. But a lot of this is just I don't know. I say some of these things, and I think that's where the cool thing about hunting and biology and academia meet. It'd be something that maybe add to it is like, hey, should we measure a Jake track?
Yeah.
And based on, all right, I know this turkey here, like turkey number 12 you were talking about, that you knew that was predated at 5 or 6. I wonder what the footprint or the, like I don't even know if we're doing that thing, but there is some of these, I call it the OGs of hunting, like the Eddie Salters, the Harold Knights, the David Hills. They would say things in the turkey woods.
Sure.
And I mean,
and they've put some time out there and put their hands on some birds. And
and
that's hard to replace.
Yeah, and I remember every time, literally some of those, I'd come back, not in a journal, but I'd write it down in either my mind, and a lot of this stuff I didn't have to write down because it hit me hard. Like when Eddie said, look, here's a gobbler. Here's a gobbler working with a Jake. And I thought, man, this dude ain't a psychic.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I was telling the story. We get up there, Patrick, and we work these turkeys. I'm a camera jock. I'm toting this big beta cam. We work these turkeys in range. Eddie finally gets this turkey to strike. There was one turkey gobbled. And guess what comes walking in? A freaking longbeard. It was a 2-year-old longbeard and a Jake.
Huh.
And he just, based on a 2-track in Alabama, it said, this is a Jake and I thought, this man has lost his mind.
That's a man that spent a lot
of time
in the
I didn't think
woods.
Eddie Salter smoked dope. I think he's smoking weed right out here as we freaking hunting turkeys. And again, I don't know if it was a coincidence, but it always hit me like, man, I want to tell some biologists, can we start measuring, like when you capture a Jake, can we measure his footprint? Maybe there's just still something out there. I don't know.
You missed out on this past trapping season. We just shut her down. We normally, January and February here are our biggest months, and I mean, we measure a lot of things, tarsal length,
But you don't think about measuring tracks.
But I've never measured the middle toe.
Well, I've always thought too, you look at humans. Some of us wear a 9 shoe, some of us wear a 12. Then you got Shaquille O'Neal that wears a size 39, I think. Sure. I don't know what, but obviously different statues and
I've never really thought about that. I mean, obviously when you determine a track, we know, typically a male's track is, 3 to 4 inches, I think the textbooks say, and under that is typically a hen. But in terms of like variation within males themselves, man, someone could prove me wrong and have that information, but I don't have it.
I've never still measured a foot. I thought about, and it's like, think of the world of hunting, and we don't really kill jakes. I have had kids, and I've had first timers, and even situations where people have shot jakes, and I've always said, I'm gonna, cut this foot off and literally, start making tracks in the sand, like my own little rudimentary experiment. I've never done it. Not that it matters, but that would be more from a hunting side of things.
We'll see when students and stuff are putting their hands on birds next year. Maybe one of them will hear this podcast and they'll be like, "I'm going to measure all the
Eddie, you're wrong," or maybe Eddie, you're right, or maybe it was just a coincidence in that one situation. But I'm so intrigued by the pecking order. I'm so intrigued by the characteristics. I think in understanding turkey behavior, people ask me like, "Man, I'm trying to get a turkey." They're not digging deep like we are here in this podcast talking about the habitat and all the things we'll discuss on how turkeys are more. Obviously, we all want more and more turkeys.
Right.
We want them to the point to where they're a problem. Somebody asked me, he's like, "Man, where would you want turkeys to be?" I said, "I want them to be a problem. I want them to be on my porch." And my wife like, "Oh my God, I'm tired of this turkey crap on my porch, on my patio. They're down here beating up my rooster chickens. I want them." That's how much I love seeing them. It's not even anymore about even just killing one. I still enjoy the hunt with friends and my families. And obviously here we are in the throes of turkey season. So all of that's incredibly exciting to me. But now I find myself this is unique about how this turkey acts, how this turkey seems to be subordinate. And some of those things in my mind as I'm working a turkey, that's what I think develops a good turkey hunter, is because you almost understand who you're dealing with.
Reading situations.
You're almost like a pickup artist. I mean, not a good analogy to, if back in the days, and maybe you were that way. I don't know where you met your wife, but there's a difference in this girl. She might be looking for the cowboy. This girl might be looking for the guy who's very smart and got his stuff buttoned up and got on the quarter zip and the little shorts and loafers like they wear in Ole Miss a lot, it seems. I don't know. That was a little inside joke, I think. I shouldn't have said that. Somebody in Ole Miss has probably turned this podcast off immediately. But my point is, there's different things out there. So I know in working turkey, sometimes you can quickly understand like, okay, this is old King Daddy here.
Yeah, I feel like
this probably is the oldest by rule. You might even think the smartest, but this turkey's probably dead this morning based on, I know this turkey. I don't know him, but I know him enough to know that this turkey's in trouble this morning.
Yeah, you're taking his temperature.
Yeah. Versus some turkeys ain't gobbling that much, and I'll have a hunter with me, and they're thinking, "Oh, that's old smart turkey." Like more than likely, that's probably a subordinate. We're gonna have to approach him different. That turkey is probably going to be the toughest turkey to kill. And sometimes the old smart turkey, you'll think, and can get confused with the toughest turkey to kill. And I've always thought that there's a little myth to that. It's the personality of each and every turkey on that day sometimes,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's even some science behind that, some papers that we've published recently looking at how individual behaviors influence their survival. And that's harvest and predation. And essentially what you see are those birds, and it varies, right? Like some of them, like to your point, they'll be very predictable in the way they behave. Most days they behave this way. They don't move very far. They're kind of tight-lipped. Then you have other birds that, they kind of run all over the place. And then you have birds that are just unpredictable altogether, right? Some days they stay really close. Some days they move really, really far. And what the research has suggested is that from those birds that do the roaming and the running and do that more frequently, they're more susceptible to get shot by us. And I don't know what your experiences are in the woods, but to me, this makes sense because that's typically your loudmouth 2-year-olds that you can call 400, 500 yards.
They're trying to find their place in life, essentially.
Correct.
I agree with that. I do.
And so, but on the flip side of that coin is from a predation standpoint, those individuals that stay really, really close and are very, very predictable, most people are not good at killing those turkeys. At least that's,
I agree with that.
That's what we would suggest. They know that area really, really well. They're in tune with it. It's hard to get to and kill those turkeys. But from a predation standpoint, they're at higher risk from predation. But to keep all that keep all that in perspective, in these populations, harvest rates are about 30%. So, you've got, say I mark 10 birds, 3 of those three of those are going to get shot. And then from a predation standpoint, it's about 15%, 10, 12, 15 is roughly what we see. So, you can't really have a turkey and a half die in that analogy, but it's about half of what harvest is in the majority of these populations. So, yeah, the predation pressures act differently on different individuals, but also there's different levels of predation built in there as well. But yeah, it's all cool stuff, man, and it's learned so much about these birds, and they'll make a liar out of you all the time. From a scientific standpoint, it's a pain in the butt because people want to talk in normals and averages and influences. It's like, man, these turkeys they're individuals and they all behave differently, and the pressures that are influencing that bird are different than the one that's 600 yards down the road, but that makes it fun too.
Well, what you're saying does go along with my theory based on just hunting. And this sounds crazy. Like, obviously, if you see what we do, and let's just say we're somewhere and we get a turkey and it's a beautiful video. Well, first of all, the first common negative response in a comment on any content we put out there, whether it's YouTube or social media, like, well, it must be nice, you're hunting the farm birds or you're hunting the whatever. And it's funny, I never argue this point, but it goes dead against what they're saying in so many cases. Like, for here, this sounds crazy, like you're here on our farm, and our producers always throw them a bone. Ryan Wakenig and Cohen Stone are here. They've hunted with me all over this country. These nobody wants to hunt my turkeys on my farm. Well, one is, I'm trapping. I'm always putting habitat, so I can almost just about go ride around and show you a turkey, and almost ride by them on a Polaris or a buggy or something, and they don't run. So you'll think, dude, we're gonna run a rake through these turkeys. Well, here's what I've noticed that wasn't through academia, but it goes along with some of the academia and scientific research. You said these turkeys' social structure is so amazing that some of these turkeys don't go far, some that do, and man, I'm telling you right now, using a decoy is nearly impossible. Like, it's almost like they just know. I'm not saying they do. I always try to minimize a turkey's intellect because they do have a small brain inevitably. But I've always thought I hate yard birds to hunt, because to call and work them in a circumstance. Can you kill them? Could you go sit out by a tree? They're going to be there every day? Yes, you can deer hunt them and you're going to be successful. I don't enjoy that style of turkey hunting.
Me either.
The opposite side of that, I found myself in vast, big woods where there's not a big concentration of turkeys. But when you find a turkey, you kill him, whether it's public or private. And so I have found sometimes when I hear turkeys and they're all grouped up on a roost and there's just 5 or 6 eastern turkeys gobbling, I actually, unless I know the property, and people are maybe thinking I'm talking BS, but I'm immediately more anxious of working those turkeys versus I'm sitting and I hear one turkey go way over here. I hear one turkey way over here. And maybe I'm in that landscape like you grew up in New York or PA. And even though we all know PA and New York's got tough turkeys to hunt too, because I always say they will all judge the great American turkey yelp off. And so, they've been, sometimes they have pressure on them. But when you think about not only the pressure maybe they had on them, but I think the most immense pressure that these turkeys have on them is their social structure itself. And so when I can find a lone gobbler, maybe it is a 2-year-old that's 2 miles away from home, or he's on the backside of that 2,000 acre range, and all of a sudden he's trying to find, he maybe got beat up over here and he moved on over. Maybe the last few days he's been gobbling by himself. Man, 4 or 5 yelps, whether it's public or private, and if I got to him first, that turkey is dead within 3 minutes of me getting him gobble. Versus a turkey that's in the backyard that we're getting our battery chargers and there's 4 or 5 turkeys strutting in a Texas ranch. Like, I'm quicker to say, no, let's go deeper. Not because I'm trying to be one of these purists and go deep into the forest. I want to find a turkey that's maybe a little more lonely, that's trying to find his way. Selfishly, I want that turkey to work, whether he's private or public. And I just found that the tighter the social structure is, the harder it is to become a stranger and manipulate that. Because even though you could have Matt Van Sice or Dave Owens, who's a great caller, and I'm not saying your chances ain't better with unbelievable vocals and realistic tones and rhythms and sounds. I would definitely take a good call in over bad. But they don't know. They don't know that turkey.
Yeah.
That other hen, like, who is this?
Yeah.
Bitch. Sound like a beautiful voice. Celine Dion. This gobbler over at Gobbling, like, I don't know this. It's like, and it becomes strange. And I find it similar to what we do when we walk into a get together or a social. How nice is it? You catch yourself, I hate cliques, like, it's like the old middle school parties, me and you play football together and all of a sudden there's old Wayman Gresham and Jackson Bishop and there's Ryan Wakenig and we all play. Well, we're immediately over there, we're bowled up to the Doritos at the middle school party eating because we played baseball, football together. Then you got Laura Joe and Buffy Snow and all them. They're hanging out together. And then so many times a lot of the parties don't mix. But then all of a sudden, if we're all having to get to know each other at this party, none of us know each other. We're kind of forced to say, "Hey, Patrick, I'm Michael." Like, "Oh man, what do you do?" "I went to LSU." "Oh, I didn't go to college, but man, I did play football. You play football." And then all of a sudden, it's less cliquey. And I've noticed that these properties that are smaller, that have more social structure to it. I know people might argue this. I found sometimes those turkeys are harder to kill by the traditional, just yelp them in. Versus a vast. That's why I think Merriams are so fun to hunt and easier, is because they're so spread out. You can finally, like, and he's 2 canyons over, and you're like, me and you grew up hunting Easterns. You're like, I don't know, man. We probably got to get on that mountainside. What do you think we need to go over based on our experience? And all of a sudden, you're like, we're talking and trying to come up with a strategy, and he's like, hit him again, Patrick. He's coming. Yeah. That turkey is coming. He's going across everything that the rule of thumb says. He's come off the hill, down the hill, coming back up a hill. He's still got to come over another little ridge and down the bottom to get to us. Then we sat there and like, you know what? Pour the coal to him in that box call. I think we kill him right here. That's a lonely gobbler.
No doubt.
Wandering out through the vast western landscape like a drifter looking for water in a bowl of a bowl of rice or something. And so I don't know, but...
Yeah.
So some of the research has found that.
Yeah. Individual behaviors, and some of them are more susceptible to dying.
How tight is that social structure, you think?
Oh,
with
man.
The hen, I'm talking about not just with the gobblers.
Yeah.
Is it pretty? Is it? I don't want to say just it is a family, it's a flock, but is it very similar to? Do we feel like these hens know each other, or there's some trace back to each other? The gobblers know each other, and the hens.
I think absolutely. From a research perspective, it's hard to put numbers or something to that kind of question. But yeah, I think absolutely they know who each other are, and I think from a female perspective, from a science standpoint, where we've seen it is looking at laying times, right? So if I've got a flock and I was fortunate enough to put transmitters on the vast majority of them, and that's kind of their winter flock, then they'll maybe say it's 12 or 14. And then when they kind of break up out of that, you'll end up with maybe 6 or 7 hens. This is all, it can vary by group. And what we see is that when they start laying, it's synchronous, meaning that one hen will go, and I'm assuming we're not watching. We have GPS points, but I don't always have the times, marked in the same exact area. And so I might not know if she's breeding or not. But what we're assuming here is based on how we see the synchrony in laying, is that hen, she breeds probably the dominant hen. The very first hen gets the first chance at breeding with this time. And then
she's similar in dominance to the gobbler in dominance, essentially.
In the different sexes. Yeah, sure. And so she gets bred first, and she leaves first. And there's a lot of advantages to that. The research shows that the early turkey is the most successful turkey, meaning the earlier in the year you start incubating a nest, the higher probability of you surviving and hatching and raising a brood is. And so you see them one after the other kind of go and lay, and then a couple days later, a second will go and lay, and then a third. And so the idea there is that is their dominance hierarchy coming out in what I call a field observation. And so, yeah, I think they're pretty close. And I think they know who each other are. I really do.
Almost like Paula saying, "Hey, you know, Sarah's already on the nest."
Yeah, she left. It's your turn now.
Girl, we need. I know we've been interested. You know, the bugs are starting to hatch, but we need to get with this.
Yeah, I try not to treat them like people are anthropomorphizing, but it's hard not to, right? Because this is what we do. It's what we live. It's what we do. It's like, as a wildlife researcher, they always tell you that don't anthropomorphize animals. But it's like,
dude, I'm the same way.
But it's hard because when you're like, my job is to sit down and be able to discuss research with people that didn't spend 10 years learning biology and ecology. And in order to make that connection with them, you're often talking through metaphors, which are people.
Yes.
So it's like, so there's a fine line there. We don't want to anthropomorphize animals, but at the same time, I want to be able to describe what I'm seeing scientifically to the common
And there
person.
is a relatable thing of, I've always said, like hunting, it's funny. I'm so staunch on keeping the comparison to humans and wildlife separate, where I've never will name, like I hunt whitetails, but you know how everybody say, yeah, that's old Joe. That's Big Joe. You know, that's Gnarls Barkley. And, you know, all my buddies from the Midwest, they all have the deer and deer's on the hit list. I never will name my deer because I'm like, I'm going to not name them Joe. Like, oh, I killed Joe this morning. That just sounds weird for me. It's like, I'm not BTK killer. I'm just a deer hunter.
What do you do? Because I know you have target bucks, right? You're managing your herd. You're not just out there.
We're videoing this, and my son, who you met earlier, one time we're hunting. I never get this. Cohen's videoing us, and so he was in college at the time. We come back, and it was a nice, cool evening. And he said, Dad, I don't want to make a mistake. I mean, I know we got a lot of mature deer. And he said, what do we got? And I said, well, here, I pulled up my computer. I said, this buck right here. He said, what you call him? I said, I call him the Big 8. And he said, okay. And I was like, and I said, I don't like to name deer. And I said, this is the Big 8, the big crab 8. Okay. And this is the Big 10 long G2 left. And my son tapped me on the shoulder. It's on one of the shows. He said, Dad, I know you don't like naming deer, but this was equally as awkward the way you've got these bucks. It's like, this is way more confusing. It'd be better to say Joe, whatever. But it's hard not to, from a standpoint as a hunter. I've always thought of it is the behaviors of some of this wildlife, from elk, deer, turkey. I'm sure it just goes all the way down, possibly to lizards and frogs. I don't know. But the things that I desire to hunt, for table fare and just the excitement of the hunt, I have noticed that they do have characteristics of dominance and things like that. And then you just strip away any morality to a degree. Like, obviously, we get married, and we have certain society rules that we follow, but that elk or that bear don't.
Oh yeah.
A turkey don't either. Like a turkey literally, as morbid and ancestral as it can sound, they are breeding kin people. They're cross pollinating, whatever the word is. They don't have a problem with all of a sudden.
Yeah, they try to avoid it, but it happens.
It happens. Or like like it feels like a brother. Like there's two brothers that were raised in a flock, and all of a sudden one brother's injured. Instinctively, we would never do this in the human world, but that other brother will just beat the tar out and try to kill him.
Oh, yeah.
Out of his selfish desire to be dominant, dictator, and the guy that does most of the breeding. And so in my mind, it makes wildlife a little bit easier to manipulate when you take the social standards. And so that's the only time I compare it to humans. It's like, this is like the big dude, but he has no morals. So you strip away the morals, there's a lot of things that can happen. The dog, so to speak. What did the old timers used to say? The women folks say, man, that dude, he ain't nothing. He's just a dog. and I finally understood what that meant. He's a dog, meaning he acts as a dog.
Yeah.
He acts on his instincts to breed. He's at
there's
the bar. He's drinking. He don't care. He ain't worried about.
There's a female dog and he's running, baby.
So a turkey is not worried about societal rules. They're not worried about if their picture makes them look stupid by jumping up and breeding a hen decoy.
They're worried about surviving and reproducing.
Yep.
That's about as simple as you can make a turkey.
In the reproduction part, it's almost a God-given natural instinct. Obviously, they appear to be very horny. I mean, lack of better words, but it's almost bred like we had got the uncanny desire to reproduce and create more for survival.
Absolutely. We call that innate behavior. And so it's not learned. It's hey, when they come out, this is what we're here to do.
And we humans don't really have that. It's more of it seems desirables.
Yeah,
and
more learned behavior in humans.
Not to say you're not trying to build your family or, man, I want to carry on my last name. I'd like a couple kids. Where it seems like the wildlife ain't worried about how many kids. They're trying to have as many kids in this sense.
Yeah, I mean, it varies with species. You know, you've got different ecological strategies. You got certain species that put a ton into reproduction itself, meaning, hey, I don't care if I survive. I just want my genes passed on. I just want this to, like, I just want to live. And so they'll take risks and they'll have typically lower survival. And then you've got other strategies where it's like, I'm not going to pump a bunch into reproduction because I'm going to die. Instead, I'm just going to do it when I'm best fit, you know, when the time is right. And take kind of more the survival of the individual is more of the strategy. Like over time, if I survive long enough, then I'll have enough kin to pass on my genetics.
We're going to stop for a quick break, but please don't go anywhere. We got so much to come.
Spandau Arms was founded with a simple idea. The best part of hunting isn't the gear, it's the memories. From the first rooster rise of the season in the tall grass to the last second opportunity on the target buck as sunset closes in, Spandau believes firearms should be built to perform, priced to be accessible, and designed to become an essential piece of your hunting story. Their lineup includes field-ready shotguns and precision-driven rifles built for hunters, competitors, and recreational shooters who know that quality and dependability matter more than the hype. Born from the experience of American hunters and crafted by generations of gunmakers, each Spandau firearm is built for real-world performance in the moments that matter.
Look, I love a good cigar. I also love a campfire and stories and a little philosophical talk with my buddies in hunting camp. Like I said, nothing tops it off like a good stogie. And if you're looking for that ultimate cigar experience, Cigars International is your go-to destination for premium handmade cigars. As the industry leader, Cigars International offers the largest selection, unbeatable prices, and customer service that's second to none. Plus, free shipping every day. There's no minimums, there's no limits. Just shop, check out, and enjoy free delivery on every order. Whether you're new to cigars or a seasoned aficionado, Cigars International makes it easy, approachable, and fun with expert guides, staff reviews, and helpful advice. It's not just about cigars. They've also got cool accessories, from humidors and much more to elevate your smoking experience. Ready to light it up? Right now, you can get 20% off your order plus free shipping every day with my code Waddell. That's WADDELL at checkout, or visit cigarsinternational.com/Waddell, and the discount code will automatically apply.
But turkeys are kind of weird, man. They fall in like this middle ground, right? They're not a real short-lived bird like a quail per se that puts a ton into reproduction, but they're not a really long-lived bird like I'm trying to think, an eagle or a sandhill crane, right? 20, 30 years on average, I think. Some of them don't quote me on that, but I think I remember reading that in undergraduate. And so their strategies are a little bit different, but turkeys kind of fall in the middle ground.
What is a life expectancy of, say, a...
Yeah, I mean,
is there a certain rule? Is it 5 or 6, 7? I don't know.
I think it depends on the sex and whether there's hunting or not. And so if you're a male, what the research has shown is that the average bird dies at 2 years old.
Wow. 50%, whether it's through hunting or predation or...
Yes, correct.
Right.
And that's... and that seems to be the case in most places. As a 2-year-old male, you've got about a 50% chance of living. Once you get to 3, your odds get a little bit better, stay the same about 4, and then it kind of just, the older you get, it kind of curves off. Eventually, something's gonna come across you. Something's gonna. But
left alone, say if you took out hunting, where I hear people say, "Man, I don't even kill any turkeys on my property. I'm a bird watcher," or maybe I get 1 turkey a year and I live on 1,000 acres or whatever. But it seems like you'll have around the same, or you have some years you might have a little more, a little less. Is there, based on the social structure and what maybe can live based in that spring a year, so to speak, because you definitely see more turkeys in the fall where they're all flocked together. you might see 15, 20 gobblers
Sure.
together. In the same token, pasture over, there's, another 10 jakes that maybe it was a good year, and 10 jakes, or you'll see a flock of 50 hens. I've seen that. You see that in the fall stages or even in the winter stages. Where in the spring, you'll think, oh, Lord, I'm going to have 20 gobbling turkeys on my place. And then all of a sudden, there's 2 gobbling. It's like, they obviously split up. But what on average, if completely left alone, have y'all found? Like if they're not hunted and only predators and disease could kill them or weather?
Yeah, so for females, it's about a 30% chance of dying. It's about 70% chance of survival every year. So if you're to run those numbers out, I think from a female perspective, I think someone would say, and that's hard because we don't have a lot of these birds where we know exactly how old they are, right? Like,
right.
And so, but I would say your average hen probably, 4 or 5 years old. I would take a guess, maybe not 6. But I mean, we have some crazy ones that get recaptured that are 12. Had a band put on them and get someone finds dead or gets hit by a car, so almost 12 years old. We see ones that are 8, 10. Like it happens, and I'm sure there's a bunch that die younger as well. But from a female perspective, on average, no hunting, I'd say probably 5 or 6. From a male perspective, because they don't have to incubate, right? They don't have to sit on the ground for 28 days, and so they're not under that kind of predation pressure. Like I said earlier, our male predation rates are anywhere from 12 to 15%, and that varies by site. But so my guess is they would live a little bit longer, 8, 9 years old in our unhunted populations. But like I said, honestly, the data itself, I was just really, as the scientists, we just don't have a ton of it because it's hard to know exactly how old birds are when they die, and then you've got to find them and get them back, and then get a sample size to know, and so it's tough. But those are my anecdotal hypotheses.
That all makes sense, but based on the research, and that was cool to hear that inevitably, based on the research where y'all had been able to aim that information. Most of the time it's 2, maybe 3 years of age, even in the gobbler where there's hunting and predation, weather and disease. So like I said, that is kind of a footprint, but in the standpoint, it's not completely, again, not comparing it to humans where, we got a life expectancy or whatever, and it changes based on 30 years ago versus what it is now. I don't even know what
your landscape dictates. From a turkey's perspective, your landscape dictates how long you live. A lot of it is where you live and the pressures that are around you. And for males, like, that's definitely, harvest is definitely additive in my mind. Meaning, I get this question a lot. It's like, well, if I don't shoot them, then they're going to die anyways. A bobcat's going to eat them, and so we might as well kill them. And with turkeys, that just doesn't hold necessarily true. I'm not saying there's some what they would call partial compensation, at really low harvest rates, but at a 30% harvest rate, we've studied birds that are in a non-hunted population. And what you see is that the predation rate is the same in our hunted populations and our non-hunted, meaning that in the non-hunted population, there's not more getting predated, and in the hunted population, there's not less. So to me, that's additive mortality. And so your life expectancy as a male, if you're in an area that's hunted, is definitely lower.
Right. Because you do have possibly Eddie Salter after you. You have,
hopefully not him.
Not him. I was going to say, it might go down way down.
Because you're in big trouble then.
Man, I'd hate to live on Eddie Salter's farm,
No doubt.
But to me, all this is really interesting because I've always, and for me, this is the first time, probably the only person I've ever had a deep dive conversation in some of this was probably Dr. Kinnemer, and we were hunting turkey. So we were obviously trying to be the predator. We was trying to kill a turkey. We'd done our philanthropy at that point and gave back and raised money for what we were doing. And, at the time, the National Wild Turkey Federation still are. But, we were like, okay, this is our time. Let's go. We could each go try to kill a turkey. And we did, and we had so much fun, but we had a lot of this conversation. And it's so interesting. And I feel like now with the technology, and especially, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about this, how y'all have used GPS. Obviously, when you look at trail cameras, some people love them, some people hate them when it comes to hunting. But from a research, I had said this the other day because we did a trapping video that's on YouTube right now with Exmark mowers and lawnmowers and stuff, and we did specifically like trapping and why and what and how, some of those things, and was talking about nest predation. And I'd heard the study, and I thought it had been done at UGA where they had put trail cameras on, say, hen nest. and to where the percentages was crazy at some of the nest predation that gets on those turkeys.
Yeah, most of your nest predation. So it's about 70%, meaning 30% of our hatch rate is typically anywhere. I mean, some of our study sites in Georgia, it's as low as 20% pretty consistently.
Of a turkey that lays her
so if you've
12 to 13 eggs. Or,
if you've got 10 hens, only 2 of them are going to hatch a nest.
Wow.
And like our population in Georgia, that's the case. And we see about 20 to 30% and that's been pretty steady for a long time. Honestly.
What was the number one predator? Did y'all have one, or is it obviously it's probably several?
So sorry to get distracted there. Go back to your initial question about the camera stuff. Now, with the camera surveys, most of that work is done on Rios because they're hardier tied to the nest. Meaning, if you go in there and you mess around with the nest, they're not likely to abandon. Where Easterns are finicky, man. Like if you flush a female Eastern off her nest early on, especially during incubation, she's gone. She's not coming back.
She's gone, like maybe before, but even if she's got a couple eggs there.
Oh, even if all the and she's just from a predation standpoint, this goes back to my survival over my young survival. It's like I'm out of here.
I'm saving my butt.
I'm saving my ass. I'm
where
out of
Rio
here.
has a little bit more.
Well, yeah, Rio just seemed to be a little bit more. That it doesn't bother them. You flush them off a nest, they'll come back. They've just got more fidelity, more, they're just more likely to come back. So a lot of the camera work is focused on Rios.
Because of that reason, y'all don't want to be the guys that disrupt the.
Correct. But from that work and other works, and people have tried to do it on Easterns, but realized that they were having an impact on nest success even more so that. It's a mix of everything, man. Yeah. It's a mix of everything.
Maybe the cellular cameras have probably helped a little bit. At least you get a good lithium batteries in there.
I know there's some researchers out there trying to do it. And I'll be curious to see what they find. I know from Brett's lab and Mike's lab, and from my perspective, when I was coming through, it's just like, man, these turkeys already got enough pressure on them. We know there's a ton of. Like predation is what's killing these nests. Like that's obviously what's happening. We know that there's a lot of different factors. Are we going to gain that much information from potentially influencing a successful nest? And in my opinion, it's maybe. I didn't want to take the risk. The populations are already struggling, man. As a researcher, it's a fine line, right? Like you want to observe these birds, you want to collect metrics, but you also want to make sure you're not biasing your results because you're in messing with them more than they would be if you weren't researching them. And then B, I don't want negative effects of me being there as well either. And if that's from a survival reproduction standpoint, then I'm really less likely to dive into it, just because, man, like you, I want turkeys everywhere, and every nest and every egg in my mind matters.
If I got 12 eggs, you'd like to see 12 of them hatch.
Yeah, and for research, it's tough because sometimes we have to, that you're having some impact, and but the cost is worth it for the knowledge that you'll gain and the turkeys you'll save on the back end, right? Like there is some of that. Like there is some sacrifice, right? You got to crack an egg to make an omelet, kind of thing,
right?
But we try to minimize that, and so the research has shown that, man, it's snakes, crows, possums, armadillos, raccoons. Then you've got your predators that are trying to attack the turkey and will eat eggs. Bobcats, fox. I'm trying to think of missing coyotes. And so, it's a lot. And that's why the trapping thing, you and I were talking a little bit about it earlier, is like, it can potentially be beneficial. And I don't ever discourage anybody from trapping to help increase turkey populations. If done correctly, I think it can have an impact. But boy, it's tough because there's just so much that want to eat a ground nesting bird, man.
Yes.
And it's hard to be a damn turkey, and it's hard.
It's
hard to make a turkey.
I've seen that. I've had turkeys I've raised, from the feed store bronze turkeys to even known people to have some wild turkeys to where, maybe a nest got bush hogged and literally the hen get killed. And I've heard of people that try to raise them and, or just try to save or salvage a nest. I don't even know if that's legal, probably illegal, but at the same time, I've seen it from the standpoint of it just proves to you how everything seems to be after those nesting hens and the protein that's in the egg. I like an omelet.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think Coon loves a good egg.
I eat 3 eggs every morning, man. That's
I mean,
how I start my day.
I love them too. I didn't have them this morning. I was up there talking with my son and my wife. We didn't get our eggs in, but I even just in seeing this chicken coop, I mean, it never fails. There'll be 3 or 4 chicken snakes every year that if you want to have the hair stand up on the back of your head, reaching there and doing your chicken chores and reaching there and grabbing eggs from that just the laying hens, and you all of a sudden feel something slivering. It's about a 6 foot long rat snake chicken. We call them chicken snakes.
Yeah.
I guess they're probably a rat snake, but Dad obviously ain't looking for a rat.
Yeah.
And I also noticed there was a couple times where my wife was, she was actually hatching out some species of chicken. She got into the silkies and the Polish, and she was just learning and still loves it. She's got chandeliers in their chicken coops. It's a little awkward in there. She plays Daryl Singletary and Conway Twitty Farm at night. I'm thinking they'd probably turn the radio off. They'd probably sleep better. But anyway, whatever. She themes it Christmas. She'll have little Christmas decorations. She loves it. But I've also noticed a couple times those biddies would get a certain size, and I kept finding some of the poults that would still be at night under their hen. And I kept finding these biddies that would be, their head would be stretched out, and then they got pretty good size. And finally I went in there, was a darn chicken snake trying to eat the poult itself under the nest. But they were too big to swallow, and so there'd be like, what has killed this chick?
Yikes.
Or this biddy, I called it, and it'd be a darn snake. And
And yeah, snakes are definitely, I mean, they're nest predators for turkeys as well, without a doubt. I mean, I think, you've probably seen the videos, and I sure have, of turkeys whooping up on snakes as well, right?
Yeah.
Defending them, throwing them around. And I definitely think that certain hens do that and are probably successful on the nest because they're aggressive and they throw snakes and fight off possums and stuff. But there's also, like I was saying earlier, some that's like, man, if a snake comes up and starts pestering me, I'm out of here. And then they're going to consume every egg. And then even if she does come back, there's no more eggs. So,
yes.
And snakes, that's a hard one. It's a hard one to quantify. It's pretty typical if you come up to a nest and you don't find any egg shells, any sign of a lot of disturbance I'm talking about a predator, or what we assume, we're tracking the hen, and all of a sudden I roll up in the truck one day and I'm like, man, she's only 12 days in. She should be on the nest right now. Even if she's recessing, she shouldn't be this far away. So we'll go in and see, did it fail? What happened? And typically when you're talking from snake predation, you just don't find any eggs.
No eggs.
You find 0 eggs.
They just
no cracked shell. They just eat them whole. And I've found snakes, within 5-10 yards of the nest, and they'll just be full of them, right? Like they'll have them. And so we try to quantify snake kind of predation that way, but it's not always perfect, man. Because sometimes the raccoons will pick them up and take them, and you'll end up finding eggshells 10, 15 yards in a certain direction.
I've seen that a lot.
They'll grab them, take them away, and then mess with them.
Sit there and eat on it.
Trying to think of some other. Crows are pretty easy to tell.
What does a crow predated nest look like?
Yeah, it's just, you'll have essentially just a little, like, almost penny-sized hole in the top of the egg. And so they'll just fly in there, and they'll crack around the top of it, and then I guess they suck it out or eat in there, and then you've got an egg with just like, kind of like I said, a penny-sized hole on the top, and that's pretty indicative of a crow. But yeah, once you start getting into possums, armadillos, bobcats, it's hard to like tell.
Where a bobcat might be just as interested in the hen itself, sitting on the nest.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Have y'all found any correlation to a coyote possibly trying to kill a nesting hen? Or just
will they?
Will they?
Yeah. They definitely do. Like I said, our female predation rates are around 30%, and a lot of that occurs when they're incubating a nest. That's when they're the most vulnerable,
right?
So to speak, because they're sitting on the ground.
I think there was and correct me if I'm wrong. Did I hear research on the wet hen, which a wet hen is or wet turkey period is one of the stinkingest thing. And if you don't know, kill a turkey if you hunt out of a Suburban or a Tahoe or something that's enclosed.
Oh, yeah.
Let it get wet and throw it in there and go eat your Waffle House. Turkey's not going to spoil, obviously. Come back in and your whole inside will be stinking on that wet turkey. It's just like
Oh yeah, the wet hen hypothesis I believe is real. Anyone who's worked bird dogs, especially like quail hunted or something, like you know the difference of when your dog's doing well and there's moisture in the air and on the ground and their ability to find birds instead of when it's extremely dry. And to think that that's any different with a dog, a coyote essentially running around trying to find hens, the more she smells, olfactory definitely plays a role into it. Some of the research there's a paper I'm working on publishing right now, so I don't want to get nitty gritty into the numbers because I always like to make sure it's gone through peer review and it's just not me up here spewing nonsense. Like that's the beauty of science, right? It's fact checked by my peers. And so I'm in the process of writing that paper, but I can speak kind of at a 3,000 foot level with what I saw with coyotes. We had coyotes with collars on them in areas where I had females and male turkeys. And, obviously I didn't have every single coyote, but talking to the trapper, we probably had a good representation of at least the breeders that were there. And we also had some transients running through UNI.
Would y'all do that through working with a trapper, catch a coyote, collar him, and then release the coyote on the same day?
Yeah, absolutely. So the trapper that Dr. Chamberlain hired for that property was Rusty Johnson. And so he came out and trapped with us and essentially we would trap the coyotes, we'd put the collars on them, and then we'd let them go. And then he would pretty much run that. I got to run trap lines with him a handful of mornings. And then at the same time, we're catching turkeys and putting transmitters on them. And so from a female perspective, from a nesting, what I see is, or what the data is suggesting is that it's harder for a coyote to find a nest. Not that they don't, but it's harder, and they're honestly, Michael, they're not very good at it. Like I've looked at the GPS points, I've got all the video, like I say videos, animations of
you have them
GPS of where the nest,
by a nesting
yeah,
hen.
like power lines, for example, are a prime example. Like we get nests on power lines all the time, or on the edge of them. Coyotes, for some reason, I mean, they love that, or open early successional. They love running power lines,
roadways, and just thoroughfares.
We'll have nests right there, and they'll keep on running. They just keep on walking. They go right by. However, they do. It does happen. I just think the percentage is low. But I mean, I don't have a really good number to throw out here.
That same day after rain, possibly.
Maybe it's a different outcome.
Yeah, where maybe there's a south wind blowing and that coyote runs by. Whoa. Yeah. Something smells tasty here.
Yeah. And so into the wet hen hypothesis and kind of just scent in general. What I did find was obviously our sample size isn't as large with brooding hens because I was going through the numbers earlier, right? Only 20% on that study side hatched to begin with, and then our brood survival was anywhere from 25 to 40% on that property, depending on the year. It fluctuated a little bit. And so by the time you get down to it, I mean, that's only like 7% of our birds actually hatch or get to the poult stage and then survive the 28 days which we monitor them in. But what I'm seeing, and like I said, I don't want to speak about the numbers exactly, but what I'm seeing is that their ability to detect the brood though is higher than a nest. And to me, that makes sense because you're going from one wet bird or one large wet bird on the ground to a 10 to 12 poults also on the ground. Olfactory is going to be higher. They're going to be able to smell them better. But then also, if you've been around poults, and I've been fortunate enough to wake up around turkey poults and making sure that they have and stuff, they're noisy. Yeah. They're kicking and talking. Constantly. And mom's trying to, they're all feeding and mom's trying to kind of keep them together and stuff. And so when you add the noise and the smell and a coyote in close proximity, they're finding broods. Now, whether that creates, are they killing all the poults? I don't know. Are they killing mom? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It just varies, and with that low sample size, it's hard to sit here and tell you like this percentage and stuff.
I'm sure characteristically depends on the predator. Like I've noticed. I remember years ago I was talking to a biologist about, say, a red-tailed hawk, and they said, well, typically they're not after turkeys, but I've seen where a particular hawk. We got it on video. A red tail come down. We was working this turkey in Alabama, and it come down and grabbed a full-grown gobbler. Now, that's not a match. A 20-pound, average 18 to 20-pound adult gobbler, definitely a long-beard turkey. We could see him. And a red tail, I don't even know. They're not a big bird. They look huge flying around, but they're not a big bird. Well, for some reason, so I remember thinking, I've never seen that but twice in my life. And I'm talking about, like you've been turkey hunting since I was 12, 13. I mean, as soon as I knew we had turkeys to hunt, we started hunting them and had a chance to go everywhere. And I've seen hawks, I've seen eagles, I've seen things. But I'm sure with coyotes, it's almost like once they acquire a taste
for it.
Like I've noticed going back to the chicken coop, we had a red fox, had tons of gray foxes. Never in the history of us raising chickens have I had a gray fox get in the coop. But something about a red fox, and they're not all the time. And I had a picture the other day. I saw 2 red fox out here. And of course, my wife was like, "You better get those fox," because she remembers distinctly before we had this pen and we had a coop. They would free range in the morning. She'd feed them, obviously, and then go back and roost in the coop at night. We had a red fox come in and kill like 25. One red fox killed 25 of her chickens. And oddly, I thought it was interesting is the fact that the red fox, he literally just killed them. Like there was one particular that he was eating on, but his instinct, almost like the regular domestic dog that's curious, or like your bird dog.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you seem to can't raise chickens around bird dogs. They'll just go kill all your chickens. They're not eating them. I'm not saying they won't eat some of
that instinct.
It's just an instinct to kill. And I finally was able to literally sit down by the pecan tree and wait. Finally, that fox come back, and I shot it. And she got more chickens. We've not had a problem since. I shouldn't knock on wood here.
Yeah, right.
But I found that intriguing. I'm like, okay, with that same fox, that same red fox, are in that breed, how susceptible were they to find a brood, poults? And my instincts was, I guarantee you that fox would love to eat quail. He would kill a turkey. He'd kill anything.
Absolutely.
So at the time, I was trapping, and you know, any trapper, and this is going to make me sound a little sissy, but man, when I'd catch a red fox, they were just so beautiful. And we didn't. And once we had coyotes around here, I stopped seeing as many fox, and I caught myself letting the fox out. So in my mind, I'm trapping for bobcats and coyotes and coons and possums, predominantly for turkeys.
Yeah.
Some of the coyotes for fawn reproduction, but I'm not too concerned about some of those fawns getting eaten because, like any place, you know, deer population get out of control. So I've always thought, oh, okay, a few coyotes kill a few of these fawns, as brutal as Mother Nature is not a terrible thing. But now I've tried to trap harder because I'm thinking, okay, if I need to take out some deer, I said deers, but deer, I would rather just have some local kids like, hey, y'all want to come kill a deer, or somebody wants to come and we have a doe day and like, hey man, let's all sit in food plot and take some deer. So it's like, okay, I'll take it upon me, even though some people, environmentalists or naturalists, to say, well, let everything progress in the right way. But long story short, I guess what I was going to is saying that I do feel like we're talking about the characteristics of each turkey or even deer or as wildlife. Some of these predators have a certain situation to where they're more prone to say, I'm not saying there's not an eagle out there flying around saying, I've learned I can catch one of these 8-10 pound hens anytime I want.
Yeah.
I'm sure it happens.
Oh yeah. I'm sure it's
Does it happen in every eagle flying around?
No. Well, I mean, and it goes straight to your red-tailed hawks. I find that very interesting because I myself have also never witnessed it, and I've only ever talked to one person who has claimed that they saw it. He said that he saw a red tail circle, and I've watched them pester them plenty. You know, get above them and circle and call, and I've seen that, but I've never seen an attempt at one. And this guy claimed he saw it go down, and I have every right to trust his. I don't think he was bullcrapping me. And like I said, I've only ever heard it once. He said swoop down into the flock of turkeys. He lost sight of the turkeys and the red-tailed hawk. It was kind of in an early successional type habitat. He showed me where it was. His goldenrod with some lanes mowed through it. And went out there and found one hen with its head gone. So, and he suggested that the hawk came down, decapitated the bird, and just kept flying. I couldn't call him a lot. He's like, why is there a decapitated turkey sitting right here? And like, who knows? It could have been a horned owl the night before or whatever. But odds are, if he watched that hawk come down at it, maybe it was the hawk.
I'm finding it intriguing. I really wish Cohen Stone, our producer, who's here recording this, we were hunting together. It was in Alabama. It was just he and I, and we had a chance to free rein on this piece of property. Struck this turkey. It was the middle of the day. I say middle of the day. I'd say it's 10, 11 o'clock. Which I guess is middle of the day. Turkey gobbles, and sure enough, within 10 minutes of working a turkey, we see this gobbler working down the edge of a food plot. We're down a 2-track, and maybe I can try to get Cohen to find that footage. And so the turkey's strutting, he's slowly coming. He's not just running in. We're working him. I had no decoys out, and so I'm thinking we're going to kill this turkey. I'm excited, and all of a sudden, we see movement and it's a fight. Like this turkey grabbed this full-grown guy. I mean, this red-tail grabbed this turkey, but he's behind the brush and it's just the biggest chaos. And all of a sudden the hawk flies up and the turkey just runs out of the plot.
Dang, so
he runs away. And the only other time I had an experience where it told me that at times a red-tail would grab a turkey, I remember in high school, I wasn't that good a hunter. And so my hunting tactic was, we had a place that I hunted just out of Meriwether County called the Backfield. And I'd just go back there and sit, and I'd put me out old Feather Flex hen decoy. I'd just set a hen decoy out there and just sit back and sit by a tree and deer hunt and call a little bit. And all of a sudden I'm sitting there one day about half drifting off and thinking of where if I'm going to go to Dairy Queen or McDonald's for dinner, literally like a sophomore in high school. All of a sudden I heard whop, and I look, and there's a red tail that's got this decoy mashed to the ground. And immediately, by the time I look and I see it's a red tail, he realizes, crap, this don't feel right. And he flies off. And I'm like, oh my God. Of course I didn't get that on video. Sure. And I'm thinking, holy cow, so, but on average of all the time I spent in the woods from the Southeast all across the country, I haven't seen where a red tail would get it. Now, I have often thought that always intrigued me from a hunter and a wildlife lover is, well, how would that pertain to poults running around? Would that same red tail? I don't know.
Well, no, that's. I think they're definitely more susceptible to avian predation when they're little. Same thing with quail, right? Like they know for a fact. I mean,
red tails love quail.
Yeah, I mean hawks in general. They'll put Hawks a whooping.
Any hawk.
Yeah, they'll put a whooping on quail. So, and I mean, a turkey poult's turkey poult and a baby quail are very similar. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, and so I think there is a lot of stress there. We just don't have a lot of that information because it's hard to get survival of poults for a multitude of reasons. Mostly going back to what I was talking about before with the nests is just us disturbing them as humans, right? Like, in order to do that, we'd have to wait for a successful hatch. I mean, there is research out there that's trying to do this and see if it's having an impact on survival. But for me, and Mike and Brett just weren't keen on it, and therefore I was working under them at the time.
Right.
So we didn't do it. But yeah, you'd have to go in, trap them, get your hands on them, suture a transmitter on them, and let them go. And poult survival is already low as it is, and so it's tough. And we just always took the approach of like, we don't want to go in there, put our hands on them, mess with them, disturb them. We kind of just want to observe them from back. So from a known, but that hurts us from a what I call like a known fate perspective. Like we know that they lost them, but we don't know to what. What was the cause specific mortality for those poults? And man, I think it's probably just like the nesting stuff, a mix of a lot of things.
It's so intriguing, man, Patrick, because it's funny. I'm thinking of from a kid to now, from even the habitat change to what was going on, say in the South, to a degree, what was the same a lot about the Midwest, a lot of row cropping. One thing I have learned is certain animals do evolve, just like our habitat and the way the turkeys now gravitate toward some of these thicker areas in the South, these clear cuts, and they're more road runners. I when I hunt a place, I'm like, yeah, we're hunting road runners. And what I mean by that is I already know the turkey's probably not in the middle of this habitat. They're running the roads like a coyote or whatever, or a bobcat. But I've also noticed when I was a kid, something simple as a crow, for instance, we had a lot of row cropping, a lot of corn. And so crows were always in the cornfield. They were in the bean fields. And I never had seen a crow scavenge on the side of the road, like eating like a buzzard. Well, now you see a lot of these areas where I saw crows, they're out there, they'll be eating a dead armadillo sometimes. And so I'm thinking, I remember the first time I saw that, it blew my mind. I'm like, this is a weird breed of crow. What is this? But it hit me. I'm thinking, well, guess what? Crows don't have, they don't have the corn. So they probably had to evolve.
Sure.
Same with an eagle. Like an eagle's a beautiful bird, and we always picture the eagle swooping down and grabbing a trout in a stream, and it's just so majestic. It's like the Busch Light commercial, But then you pay attention. The eagle will sit there and act like a buzzard. They'll sit there and scavenge and eat around, and so it makes sense as habitat. Possibly the culture of the landscape changes from maybe all the cornfields are now planted pines. Well, that did have an effect on, say, the crow population or what they had to eat. They had to evolve to change, almost like you see in Western civilization, what we eat versus back in the day, we're eating.
Oh, sure.
It's simple. You can find a buffet around, but the same country in the 1920s, I mean, you know, you probably didn't do as much overeating. You made some bread. You had yeast, flour, and salt and the essentials in the cupboard. You didn't just go pony up to the pizza buffet and like, oh man, I feel like crap, because you didn't even have the ability to really maybe. And so it seems that overall there's not one magic bullet, as I've heard it said many times, and I know people get tired of hearing that, but it's often just a fact. There's not one particular thing. It's a little bit of everything. From a turkey
perspective, without a doubt, it's a lot of different things, and I think what's hard for some people to wrap their minds around is like, you know, in one particular place, maybe it is disease, right? Like in this area in the Northeast, they're interacting with more chicken farms or fowl domesticated, and they're getting higher. They're getting higher disease. Now, I'm speaking hypothetically here. I'm not. I got you. So you don't know.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you saw any correlation.
There can. I mean, I think undoubtedly when you think about things like REV, which can affect turkey populations, they come from domesticated fowl. So there's some sort of interaction that's occurring, probably
kind of like a salmonella type of vibe, or
parasites, avian influenza. Like there's but I'm not a disease expert, and I don't want to run down that road. But I was just saying, like maybe up there in that population, disease is really impactful. But then you come down to the Southeast, and it's habitat and predation, and then maybe you go somewhere else, and it's just habitat in general, like just even having open habitat is development. And so, it's harvest pressure. There's a lot of different things that influence these birds, and it's different depending on where the population lives. And so it makes it a challenge. You know, from a researcher, you're always like, people want the answers and they want the silver bullet, but it's not that simple. You know, I think you hear Mike always saying death by 1,000 cuts. And I think he's spot on.
It's a good analogy.
Our job as a researcher is to identify the biggest, what is the biggest one, you know, or at least what's having the biggest impact on the population, and then what can we do from an applied management perspective? So like, how can we change it? And so that's tough. That's also tough. But in my opinion, habitat's king. You know,
habitat's king. Yeah.
In most places, whether you're preserving it or you're manipulating it because it doesn't have what turkeys need, like that cover, that early successional, like we were talking about, poults and aerial predators. Well, if they're in a good brood rearing habitat, then they have that, you know, knee-high vegetation where mama is tall enough, she can see out, can see predators coming, know when they need to flee, but the poults are also protected from above, right? Like those aerial predators don't know they're down there because they're in the right type of cover. And so, it's all intertwined, and it ebbs and flows. Like I think how we started this podcast out. And so, I've just always been interested in science and research that can hopefully influence, like, how do we make more, right? Like that's how do we make more, or how do we just make sure we're not shooting more than we're making, right? Like that's always been my perspective to it is like, this is a finite resource. We can either make more or not, but we just need to make sure we're taking off the landscape not more than what we're replacing with it, to make sure that, you know, my kids, you know, have opportunities that I had with my father, and what you have now with your children. And so, that's kind of where my drive is from the research, especially these days. I know we just kind of took a turn, but that's where my head goes, man. These days, I got a 3.5-year-old boy at home and a 1.5-year-old girl. Man, when my boots hit the ground in the morning, I'm thinking about how can I save or make more turkeys for those two. So
that's kind of my perspective too on as it comes to hunting, is just like, well, just take less. Take less than is, what is the analogy I'm trying to say? If you're taking less than what's there, or you understand, like every place we hunt is in some cases on social media, obviously the television shows, the people that promote hunting, because for me it's two-sided. One is, I don't look at hunting as something just to go kill something. Obviously, I always looked at hunting as something that got me clear of any vices I might have. It could be stress. It could have been a death in the family, or me being able to take a young man or an older gentleman that's going through, it could be alcoholism or whatever. So yes, our goal is to kill a turkey. I know if I get this guy to get a turkey, well, maybe the passion for him to hunt a turkey is stronger than that of maybe the bottle or pill or whatever he's going through in life. And so even me, it's always been my therapy. Man, I need to escape to the woods. You know, I just looked at your schedule. You've been here. You've been down in Georgia. You live in Georgia, but you've been traveling 4 or 5 hours here and there, back and forth to Edgefield headquarters. You're out west. You're out on planes. You're dealing with flights out of, Augusta and Atlanta and going through all these airports. You're never home. Obviously, you got a family you're raising. And so when you look at all that we're trying to do, I'm sure there's times where, okay, I just want to put down biology and research, and I just want to enjoy a day of me going to hunt a turkey.
Absolutely.
And that's the same way I look at it for all, at all ages. But I have noticed even like here in the places that we have permission to hunt, I'm only going to take one turkey here, one turkey there. I don't really get into for the hunters and however you get it, whether you set in a ground blind, whether you use a decoy, whether you want to use a wing bone or box call. It's just like, look, man, if you got 4 turkeys gobbling, however you kill them, well, I don't care if you're using a strutter decoy or whatever, but just here's a good idea is maybe if you could legally kill 2 turkeys in Georgia, which you can, why don't you kill 1 there and then 1 down there at Grandpa's farm or that guy that'll let you hunt, and then or maybe 1 on public, 1 on private. I don't know. And so that is what I've seen about the hunting. It's like, you're right. Inevitably, we are a predator to them. But we're also the ones, unlike a coyote, that loves them enough. So long as you got that in you, who cares how? Just know that who cares how you kill the 1 turkey that you're going to kill on that 550? Or maybe you go in there with common sense knowledge like, dude, my neighbor's been hearing 4 or 5. I've been hearing 4 or 5. It ain't going to hurt collectively if we do hunt, then getting into the percentages of what y'all studying and saying, okay, X amount are probably going to get predated by bobcat, by whatever, and then hopefully and pray for good weather and a good spring and high grasses. And yes, this group collectively have caught a lot of coyotes, bobcats, and coons. And so maybe you can think, okay, that 30%, maybe you can push it up to 35% by your own hands of you kind of stepping in there. Not that you're God or hubris, but you are trying to take a balancing act, and it changes perspective. One thing I was going to ask, and I meant to ask this when we were talking about the nest and the predation on the hens. What have y'all found? Let's say it's a hen's been bred, which obviously here it is now. Most of our, high percentage of our hens have been bred even before the seasons come in here in the South. And I think the biologists and game and fish have done a phenomenal job of pushing back the seasons to getting a high percentage of hens at least to get ready to go brood. Yeah. So
because we're still a little early here. I would argue, but they are actively breeding. I think we're on the tail of it. But the funny thing with breeding is, and I don't want to distract you from your point.
Well, so I was saying that too from perspective, like when this hits, like probably by the time people hear this, it's probably going to be say 3 or 4 weeks out. So I would imagine people are listening to this right now. It's April, even though it's March.
Oh, I got you, yeah.
So I'm thinking, so this is kind of, I guess you could call semi-live. We release our podcast every 2 weeks. And so, I found it intriguing to where these hens that go to nest, does a hen need to be bred? Is one time enough to be bred? If she gets bred by that gobbler, she is ready to, when the time's right, to search out a nest.
Yeah. So this is not overly complicated, but it can get complex. So technically, yes, if she's bred one time, she can store that sperm. The data on how long, they used to say up to 50 days. I think now it's more 28, 30 days on how long she can store that sperm still be viable in her fertilized eggs when she goes to lay. However, the caveat there is, and where I kind of get this information from is the poultry literature, right? Mm-hmm. And so there is, however, benefits to inseminating with or breeding with multiple males, so and breeding multiple times, because you have essentially gene competition, right? Like the most fit males' genes or sperms are going to survive, and if you have that ability, then the poults are going to be more likely to survive because they're more fit. But if you just breed with a really unfit male one time, like your whole outlook, just the probability of successful just goes down, right?
So it's beneficial for that hen to be a hoe.
That's one way. That's one way to say it. And it's like from a poultry literature standpoint, what they say is they inseminate all the way up until laying, and to me that makes sense. And with multiple males, and so you have sperm competition. You also have, there's a decay in the sperm as well, right? Like the sooner it gets to fertilize an egg, or the closer that those two things are, the more likely that you're going to have success, right? Because it's going to be more viable. And so I think that's why you see competition right around, and gobbling really increase right around that laying time, because I think that's a time where males really want to be represented in that clutch. And that's also when females are probably trying to get those extra pair copulations, and they're getting that satellite tom on their way to a nest or something, and getting bred and getting that higher diversity of sperm and genetics in her. So to answer your question, yes, one time can last for 25 days, maybe more. But the more often she breeds, and with the more individuals, that should be, in theory, for this species
so
survival
that hen
better.
will, even though she's been bred, like so many times it's caught on video. I've seen it several times where gobbler strutting 3 or 4 hens out there, and you'll see one set, and you'll see them breed. And then she'll kind of scurry off, stay in the flock, keep feeding, bugging. But that same hen who bred that gobbler that day, it's not uncommon for her to be bred again within that day or within the next few days. She will breed possibly more times.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard from a science perspective. Like I don't have numbers on that or how often, because I have GPS points, but we don't visualize how often it occurs, but it does. And then we also see that from the genetic standpoint in the eggs, right? Like you might have some nests that are represented by 3 males. So
you see that genetic imprint on the genetics in the egg, DNA.
Yes, you can
that
tell
is
who
freaking awesome.
How many dads sired a clutch, and it varies. I think average what we've seen on a lot of our places, and it varies on our hunted and unhunted sites, but we really need to get into that. But there are multiple. In some cases, there's a lot of males represented, but there's also times where there's just one. But the trick is even when there's just one represented, that doesn't necessarily mean she only bred with that male. Because like I was just talking about from a sperm competition standpoint, right? Like maybe his swimmers were just
weak. He's strong.
He's fit.
Yeah.
And so he bred, and so did 4 others, but he's only represented in the clutch because he's the most fit male. And that's the kind of competition you want. And you want that genetic diversity because it makes your populations more stable for change, right? Because if you think about how, evolution works, or, or how animals adapt on the landscape, as you have, to our point, different individuals that behave differently. Some of that's innate. And then when you have predation and harvest pressures, you're selecting certain traits or genes that are better to survive under these conditions. And when you have more of that genetic diversity, then it's been shown in research that your population's just more stout. It can deal with more change, whether that's habitat, increased harvest, new predators, or what have you. It just makes your population more robust to change.
That is unique and unbelievable insight on information, because I've seen that in some in captivity. I remember one particular time, some turkeys I saw, there was a subordinate long-beard turkey, but the dominant turkey had died. And I saw this in captivity. And there was a Jake turkey that, he was beautiful, strong, stout, subordinate to the dominant turkey. The dominant turkey died. He got killed. Actually got killed fighting through some wild turkeys through the fence. Weirdest thing, he broke his leg. And then after that, this subordinate who didn't strut, kind of the looker in the wild, basically they teamed up and beat it. And so in this situation, this one turkey died. Now the subordinate turkey. And so at the time, they were incubating these eggs, not under hens or wild. It was in captivity. So it was taking them and putting them in an incubator. And so out of that subordinate, who was actively, you could visibly see this turkey breeding these hens, those eggs were not fertile. So he was having such a low success rate of hatching. Then the Jake that year, that Jake, as he matured later on, started breeding those hens. And almost all of those eggs from that Jake turkey, again, in captivity, so you got a close monitor. It's not a wild situation. It was easier to monitor. Those Jake eggs were very fertile, and they hatched. And that was probably the biggest mind-blowing situation for me to be in, from a captive situation of seeing turkeys and seeing the difference in the genetics. And this was only several years ago I witnessed this or saw this, and it blew me away. One is it let me know that, yes, a Jake will breed.
Yep.
And then it let me know also that there is a difference similar to human, even though we try not to compare.
Yep.
I mean, some dudes, I'd always laugh. My wife, I can look at my wife and she's pregnant.
Sure. Yeah, we all know.
Because I've got 5 kids, and I'm just like, and some was never even planned. It just like, dude, fun night, dude.
I do want to revisit the Jake thing, because we do have a good bit of data on that. And so while they will actively breed, and while their sperm can be viable, typically it's a low percentage of juveniles who do have viable sperm. And like you said, the older it got, and that's always
it was later that this Jake. This was on up into May.
Correct. And so I feel like, and there's times in
which is southeast, which seems a lot of turkeys are bred in March. In the southeast,
they start breeding in March, and I didn't mean to throw you off with the time earlier with when this will be released.
But that's interesting to know about this. What I saw is it makes sense that this Jake, when he matured faster possibly than your average juvenile.
Correct, and that's his testes just they weren't viable. I mean, the older they get, the more mature they get, and the more viable the sperm gets, and research shows that. And, but we typically get that, well, Jakes will breed so we can shoot all of our long beards. I don't recommend that by any stretch of the imagination. Like, you don't want to rely on juvenile males breeding your flock.
Not that they won't breed, but they might not have the swimmers.
Yeah, exactly. They might not be viable. So those eggs could be likely to be unfertile. You want some adults around. But yeah, to your point, what I always call like a super Jake, right? Like, you always hear this term.
Turkey 100% was a super Jake.
A super Jake. And so to me, that's a juvenile male in the wild. How you get that is one of those that hatches really early in the year, right? We're in the 3rd week of March right now. This will get released later. There are some hens that are probably starting to sit right now. A very small amount though. Let's make that they're the anomalies, but there are some.
South Florida for sure.
Oh yeah. South Florida, yeah, they're definitely starting. Here, there's probably a hen on a nest somewhere right now. I mean, it's like I said, it's an oddity, but we do see it. And what a super Jake is the following year, he's one of those birds, in my opinion, that hatched early. That was an early nest. He was
born in mid to late
Exactly. So that following spring, he's just that much older. He's got that much longer of a beard. He's got that much, more of a throat on him, and he's just more aggressive. And he's likely to be viable. But typically speaking, they're not. But
even the fans on those Jakes start to get pretty full by the time, like our season in Georgia comes in. I think this year it hits the last week in March, usually 1st of April. It used to come in the 3rd week in March. And we go all the way to May 15th, and that's not changed. And so I remember the earliest I remember seeing it was around Mother's Day. I've seen several times early in mid-May, where I've seen poults, like literally be actively hunting and see, like, wow, that's kind of weird. I'm hunting turkeys and seeing turkeys with poults. Yeah. Little bitties,
those are March
but that's to me, I never was into that. I mean, make no mistake, my desire was to figure out how to manipulate a turkey and get them in range, even in the days when I knew I was very understanding of the numbers. Sure. Meaning, you're always trying to chum up as many good turkey hunting spots as you can. And maybe you're lucky to where you got this place, maybe it's 150 acres, somebody lets you hunt. You got another 500 acres, you're in a Mead Club lease. In this case, I own some property, and I'm in my mind, this is the time of year, I'm already tracking it out in my head of, this guy's going to let me hunt here. I get to go to Tennessee. I'm going to try to get a turkey here. So maybe at the end of the year, I kill 3 or 4 turkeys. I'm embarrassed to say I used to kill a lot more. Now I see a lot of turkeys die. Most of the time it's other people, kids.
It's awesome.
We raise a lot of money, even with National Wild Turkey Federation and philanthropy. Gentlemen just paid $37,000 for a turkey hunt with me. All of that money goes straight to NWTF
and I appreciate you doing that, Mike. Being a spokesman for the federation and the organization. Joining, that team is, like you said when you introduced me, it truly is a dream come true. And the people behind the curtains with the organization, they're great. It's a great family. It's a great cause, and everybody there cares about the wild turkey. And those are the kind of people I want to surround myself with.
And that's what I've always loved about working with NWTF. The passion runs deep, and so even with that, for me, yes, it's kind of a weird deal in one way, trying to make more turkeys, But in the case to where, man, I'll call his name, Shannon Wright, he's always been a huge supporter of NWTF, volunteer, throwed banquets. He's at the national auction every year. And he paid a premium for that hunt 2 different times. And Troy Link of Jack Link's Beef Jerky, we're doing it. Make no mistake, it's a 2-day turkey hunt with 2 turkeys to kill. And make no mistake, I want him to kill 2 Osceolas. That's coming up, right? By the time this airs, that hunt will be already have been happened. So, but the way I look at it is, yes, we're going to try to kill a turkey, but in a case of raising that kind of money, a couple days that I can give back and helping guide a turkey hunt is more than what I could write personally right now from my family checkbook. Sure. Maybe I can donate, and I have donated, but my time is more valuable in this case than my money. And so, so it's always interesting to see. And when we look about all this genetic, all these findings, y'all are constantly finding. And like I said, y'all are still uncovering things under rocks.
There's more research going on right now in the turkey world than probably ever historically.
I think so.
Ever historically.
And I love it. And somebody probably listening to this is like, man, I ain't a big turkey hunter, but those turkey hunters, this to me is probably one of the most intriguing conversations I've had thus far on these podcasts, because I live, breathe turkey hunting and turkey season, and just everything about them is like the same feeling as Christmas was for me.
And for me, from a turkey hunting perspective, I feel like the vast majority of turkey hunters are that way. I don't know how to describe that for me. I mean, I duck hunt. We were talking about that. I deer hunt. Turkey hunters are passionate, man. Like sitting here talking with you, it shines through. But it's every conversation I have with turkey hunters, man. The vast majority of turkey hunters are passionate, and
very passionate.
I love that because I'm a passionate person myself, and so it's great.
And going back to these turkeys, okay, that's cool. That's a big learning thing to me. Is like I've often wondered, even through all my just hunting and watching hens get bred, I've seen it. Literally sounds crazy, but I know I've seen it probably hundreds of times. Gobblers breed hens, and I've often wondered. 2 things was intriguing about it. One is the social structure. I've always found it intriguing where you got a flock of hens and you got a gobbler, maybe 2 gobblers, and they're strutting. And they'll always, the flock will kind of move around. Let's just say they're working around the edge of a pasture or working through the woods. You always see that gobbler. It's almost like they know this hen is about to squat anytime. They know it. I don't know if it's a call. I don't know if there's something they're saying. But then they'll breed that hen, and then a lot of times they'll kind of stick with them a little while, and finally the hen then mixes back up, and you lose track. The hens look the same. It ain't like one's got a orange flag on her, and I always find it intriguing. And then I often have wondered, okay, will that turkey breed again? Is she done? And it sounds like the answer is probably not. Not just from breeding that turkey, but more than likely she will move off. And maybe she does take advantage of what y'all found to where she might use another 1,000, 2,000 acres in the next couple weeks, and she finds another gobbler, whether it be a group of jakes that she ends up getting with and squats, and whether that sperm is going to be swimmers or not. But she might breed with 3 or 4 other gobblers. To me, that's cool to know.
Or she goes and incubates, and she's like most turkeys, like we've talked through the numbers, nest gets predated and she doesn't make it. She'll go back out and try to find another one, breed again, and renest.
That was my other question. How many times will that cycle happen? Have y'all had any research on trying to get a better understanding of, okay, she was bred, more than likely she's got 3 different turkeys that bred her from the DNA results y'all pulled from the egg. But then, okay, she did all of that. She started nesting in, say, mid-April. Well, then all of a sudden she gets 10 eggs laid. She's just now starting the incubation process. Boom, coons get in it, crows, whatever. That turkey will go, is there an innate thought process or in her to say, okay, I got to get back to the flock. I got to breed again?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think it can happen in multiple ways. The sperm storage thing definitely still holds
It's still there. So even after the eggs have laid.
Technically, if it's a short window, like 10 days, she could just
turn around and find
what she has stored
and
go again. We typically see a little bit of a lag with our renests, but then there's definitely other times where I think they'll go and rebreed again and then renest. And the renesting rates really it's interesting. A second nest attempt is, I would say, somewhat common, but it varies depending on year, study site. And I think a lot of that has to do with like body condition of that particular female. Like it takes a lot to pump resources out, even to produce the eggs, then sit on the ground. You're not foraging as much as you normally would. Sure, you'll recess and defecate and eat, but you're not eating like you would. And so to me, body condition probably plays a big role in your ability to renest again. And then sometimes we'll see a third and a fourth. And I don't know what the big, the most renesting a turkey have ever been recorded. It's probably 4 or 5 if I had to take a guess. It'll be some outlier, but typically you get a second. I would say half of your birds get a second renest, but like I said, that varies by year and site. But they will renest, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But what we also see are that the actual, how do I want to put this? The actual reproductive output, or how many turkeys you're making with renests, are really, really low. Meaning the second nest. Yeah, the second nest typically don't make it, and if they do, the broods typically don't. Like when you look at a survival perspective from a female, it goes down if she renests. It's not a ton, but it is a little bit lower. And so we don't get a lot of output from those nests. A lot of them are from the first nest. It's just the most important and most crucial. But
that knowledge is not common knowledge. Would I say a lot of people that would hear this, or even for me as somebody who's hunted turkeys ever since I can remember, really, knowing that, for me, I've always theorized a lot of that based on just what I've seen while hunting. Mm-hmm. And then even after the season watching, it's obvious there's a time it finally cuts off, because here in the Southeast, primarily where I hunt, you will see that super Jake, and you can obviously identify the next year, like, man, that turkey must have been born early. Yeah. And obviously, to me, it's easier to read that on the gobbler because you have beard, you have the fan that grows.
Absolutely.
And so, obviously, the super Jake, typically, he must have been
March or early
April.
Yeah,
he was probably born in an April for sure.
But just like those are outliers, we'll get outliers on the other end too. Like I'll have hens incubating nests in July here.
Yes.
Now, like I said, it's not a lot, and those, from a graduate student perspective, those are the ones I get the angriest at, because it's, we've got to get back to college for the fall semester, and so typically we're living on these study sites, and like we're always rooting for turkeys to be successful. But I'll tell you what, the ones that are incubating in July, and you're looking, man, I got to get back to classes and do this, that, and the other. It's like, man, if she were to just become a statistic, that would be all right. Yeah, I want everyone to. But then, because if she hatches, I got to stay there.
We're getting into deer shit. I got to go to Panama City Beach.
I got to track her brooding. I got to stay there. And obviously we would, but we always joke about those late ones. But yeah, we do get those on the tail and get them on the beginning. But yeah, like in Georgia here, average, and it's pretty consistent year to year, average date of when they start incubating is right around the 18th, 20th of April. Mm-hmm. And so that means they're laying, they lay about an egg a day. You get 10, 12 eggs on average in a clutch. So they're laying early in April. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're not far off.
Do you find it too? Like we're talking about numbers. I remember like Texas is a prime example, to where typically it's a pretty dry environment for the most part. Obviously, rain's crucial. Which before we get done with this, I do want to talk about weather and bug and the brooding and stuff like that, and maybe what some landowners, and I definitely want to make sure that you can give some tips to people like me, as well as other people listening that are in leases, that they have long-term leases, control. Maybe they're a public ground hunter. Maybe there is a park rangers that's listening to this that says, man, I can do that easily to help improve success. Something simple as, like I've noticed around here, obviously I got a lot of deer food plots, some as big as 10 acres, and I've noticed, I would say the last 10 or 15 years, I would just let them completely, grow up. And even though it's more of a cereal grain, maybe not the perfect grass for turkeys, it seems I've had higher success of those poults possibly surviving from predation because they got higher food plots. The other side of it, when I was young, and just specifically looking at killing turkeys, obviously those turkeys don't like to go into those gobblers don't come across those high wet food plots, so it makes it tough to kill. So the turkeys to kill, so I would keep them mowed. But then I noticed, well, what happens when you start mowing in April? Well, guess what? You're going inevitably to guarantee yourself that you're going to just about bush hog up a nest.
Yeah.
And so I just quit.
Stay off a mower.
That's
one of my number one recommendations.
Yes.
If you care about turkeys, I know everyone gets the itch. They want to hop on that tractor. They want to crack a cold beer, and they want to bush hog some grass. Like it feels good. It feels like you're doing something, but leave the keys, man. Leave the keys at the house. Don't do it.
This year, Patrick, I'd made the commitment, my dad and I, that I wanted to plant corn, like row crop corn, not to harvest, but for my deer and turkey, and just so I probably planted 15 acres of standing corn. But man, I was just terrified. So here it is, and the old timers say wait till after Easter in the South before the frost. You make sure all the frost. And so sure enough, I waited. But guess what? As I got later into April and May when I was getting ready to plant, well, guess what I had to do? I had to turn some of these food plots. And I remember, man, I bush hogged at like 2 miles an hour. I'm looking. Luckily, I didn't, but there was one particular field over here. Literally, I was going so slow, and I looked, and I saw something catch my attention like a butterfly, and it was a turkey head, and she was nesting. Mm-hmm. And that turkey went on. Her nest did get predated, or whatever that word is, by something, but at least it wasn't by me. And so this year I told my dad, I said, like, I'm not even planting corn. I'm just going to drill some beans in for the deer early, maybe just for the habitat. But I don't know. There's a lot of things like that I started realizing or paying attention, like even burning. I know sometimes these late burns are good when it comes to snuffing out sweet gums. But, man, right now I just burned. It's been about 3 weeks ago. I got a good burn back here. Didn't burn at all. I left a lot of thick stuff for the turkeys that nest early. But those that it's starting to get warm. Yep. So I already noticed I got a nice canopy of green, and that sage is going to come back. So in my mind, I'm already fantasizing about, here at into April, I can just picture that grass being big enough for turkeys to be out there nesting and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'm just so intrigued by all of that. And going back to what I first started before I got on my long rant about the food plots and stuff, I noticed out west, say for instance, when I say west, I consider kind of Texas, southeast or southwest, to where it's dry. And I've always thought, well, you do get wet turkeys, but it's a more arid, it's harder things to smell. And in second of all, one thing that I found really unique, especially in that El Dorado, Sonora area of Texas, it was sheep country. And so it was strange to where I found out early that, man, those ranchers out there, coyotes and bobcats, because they're not really trying to be wildlife stewards, they're raising these sheep. And I'm telling you, when a coyote comes through there, it's like Al-Qaeda. I mean, it's literally like people after our women and children. And so they're after them coyotes, not to save a turkey nest, because they don't want a sheep or a goat or whatever it is they're raising, the livestock. And so the nesting habitat don't look good because it's very browsed. Yep. But you eliminated all predators and combined with typically good arid weather and just enough rain to create some good bug and brooding habitat. That area, oh my God, I remember I thought I died and went to heaven the first time I hunted that country, because there was literally, sounds exaggerated, but 50 turkeys gobbling on those Texas. So the numbers kind of go in the habitat.
Oh, absolutely.
It's weird how it all kind of, where in the South, I feel like you better have a little bit of great habitat, some possible trapping tactics. Mm-hmm. And if you do all that, you can start slowly. It seems to me, and again, it seems to me that you don't completely exaggerate the percentages, but if that percentage is, say, 20%, you maybe can bump it up to 25 to 30%. Oh yeah, if you can add 5 or 10%, which is to your favor.
And like from a turkey's perspective, let's just take nesting for example. If you go from 20% nest success to 30%, that's a big difference.
It's big.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but that translates. That's a big difference going from 20 to 30%. You're going to have at least a positive impact on the population. But yeah, Mike, you just hit on a lot right there.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I mean, we could spend a whole nother podcast about that. But yeah, the weather in arid environments or kind of the weather in general. If you were to talk to any turkey biologist like Jason Harden, who's the turkey biologist in Texas, their populations are absolutely impacted and limited by precipitation, and just for the reasons that you were talking about,
for lack of or too much.
If it's super dry, there's no vegetation, there's no bugs, there's no turkeys. Now you get a wet spring and you get green grasses and forbs and growth and insects, you're going to have turkeys. And so like you listen to the guys out there talk about it, and it's like, man, you could think you have a desert of turkeys, and then you go out there the next year, 2 years later, and it's like they're literally just coming up out of the ground, man. They're like, it's literally like they just
in a year or two, it just like it.
And so that's because they need that rain in those arid environments to get the vegetation that they're eating on for protein, but then also that it attracts the insects. And that's why, like here in the Southeast, weather is finicky, right? In my opinion, because if it's too dry for a turkey, then you don't have the insects and you don't have the cover, which are essential. But if it gets too wet, then we run into the wet hen hypothesis. And then also just like, man, if you get a lot of rain in like July, when those poults are tiny, or June, as soon as they're hitting the ground, if you have a really bad torrential downpour, I'm sure from a scent perspective, and then also just from a thermoregulation perspective, or just being constantly wet, cold. Sometimes you'll get a colder evening, and like I think that's just a recipe for disaster. But like for maybe a pneumonia or whatever, something. I don't know if I guess turkeys can get pneumonia or whatever, but. Oh, I'm sure. Physiological. I mean, their bodies are trying to stay warm, and dry. And if they can't, and they can't consume enough bugs, and they're inevitably they're going to die. And so you got to kind of have that sweet spot, right? Can't have too much rain, but you need some rain in order to have vegetation and insects. And so here it's a little bit more convoluted because we don't have the big fluctuations like they do out west, where it can completely drive a population. But it can here, in my opinion, dictate your hatch a little bit, especially a lot of rain around hatching. Like last year, for example, I don't know what you're seeing around your properties or what you're hearing from landowners, but relatively wet later in the year, and our hatch was pretty poor. Poor, yeah. Now, 2 years ago, not the case. It was good, and there was a lot of jakes on the ground last year. I don't know if you observed that, but I sure did. And then what I'm hearing so far this year is there was a lot of 2-year-olds on the landscape, which is all indicative, in my opinion, of those hatches, right? And your observations of even just the number of juveniles on the ground. Like last year, juvenile males were running everywhere in the Southeast. This year, it's hard to find one, but now we've got 2-year-olds running all over the place, and so that all kind of plays into that. And that's why, in my opinion, habitat, it can only it will help buffer some from the weather stuff, meaning if you've got sporadic forbs and grasses and bare ground. I think people forget about bare ground a lot when they're managing a piece of dirt for a poult. And why that's important is because they need to be able to traverse the landscape, right? Like if you get a sod forming grass like hay pasture or something where it's a mat grass and it's not grazed, to your point, and it's really thick, well, it's hard for a little poult to walk through that and stay dry. And so while you might think that open habitat is really good habitat, it's not, because it lacks that bare ground component. The bare ground component, to your point, that's what grazing implements in those situations, right? Having those cows in there, trampling down the grasses, chewing some of it down really, really low, but then some unpreferred species, you kind of see that spotty stuff. If it's not overgrazed, obviously you can overgraze as well, but that can kind of create that condition where you've got forbs, grasses, bare ground, and they're able to move. And to me, that's, when you can provide that type of habitat, and in the Southeast, you mentioned burning. That's one of the biggest tools that a landowner has in order to impact a landscape at broad scales from a early successional habitat, which is brood rearing habitat. And so typically what you see is if you got sunlight to the floor, you can get a fire through those woods. And in that year, if you burn it in, say, March, by the time poults are on the ground, that vegetation is going to be maybe not quite knee high, but it's starting to work up the shin, and they're attracted to that. And then
they can still navigate it because it's not a lot of thick. It's just a stems.
The thatch has been burnt, right?
Yes.
The leaf litter, the nasty stuff on the floor has been burnt, so they can get through it. Second year post burn, or it's not second year, it'd be one growing season of burn, that fouling spring, we still see them still using those types of forests if there's open canopy and there's sunlight to the floor. Unlike your industrial pines, if you don't have any sunlight hitting the floor, you can burn it all you want. All you're doing is burning pine straw. Like you're not, right, they might be able to move through the woods then because it's not sweet gum and thick as can be, but there's no cover for them or no food and nutrition. So it's you kind of have to have that sunlight to the floor in order to get these brood rearing conditions. But we'll still see them, raise broods kind of in that window. But then by the time you get to a 2-year rough, typically in the Southeast, now this varies by property, soil productivity. I can't give you one prescription per se. But what you'll see is then it becomes more of just that nesting cover. And they're not really raising broods in there. And by the time you get to 3 years, and down here in a lot of these places, it's impenetrable. The turkeys aren't walking through, and that's when you want to burn. At that point, I tell people just burn it late. There might be a nest on the edge, but they're not in there, so you're not burning nests. Now, if you're burning earlier because you want to keep more brood, or maybe you burn it on an every other year rotation because you want more brood rearing habitat. Or here, you guys have got pretty productive soils, I'm assuming, in this part of the world. Pretty decent. You're not quite into that Alabama black belt.
Yeah,
I know some of that stuff down there. Whoa, boy! Like you better be burning every other year without a doubt, or it don't matter. I've had people take me into places down there like, well, we burnt this last year, and I'm like hell, you did. There's no way. And they're like, I promise you. I'm like, wow, you guys got some soil. And so there's no perfect, prescription. You've got to think about it visually from what a turkey sees, and then create that with fire. But yeah, so that's kind of the fire prescription. And then you mentioned, the growing season. The growing season burns, that's attractive to people because you typically get better woody kill from the sweet gums down here, get more forbs, more insects. But yeah, to your point, if you're burning on a tighter kind of interval or rotation, and you think that there's chances that those birds are using that area still, but you want to keep it in that brood rearing, successional stage, then I always try to say pay attention to what time of year you're burning. Personally, I try to advise small acreage blocks. Yep. We've seen more patchwork burn, the smaller mosaic that you can create, the better. And then I like if you're burning on a quick return interval and you think there's still nests in there because there's only a 2-year rough. Definitely try to pay attention to the time of year. I like to try to tell landowners in this particular region, March. Like, I think March is your sweet spot because you don't have a lot of them nesting yet. You're still getting some green up from those sweet gums, and they're starting to bud out, and they're
got a better chance of killing some of those.
Yeah, because they're allocating
gums.
Their resources to the buds, so they're just weaker. They don't have as much to consume. So if you burn during the dormant season all the time, you're not going to control that woody substrate as much. But if you get a chance to hit it in March when it's budding out or later into the year, you're going to have better kill off. But like I do personally tell landowners, like, man, if you want to do it, because I do it a lot, because I think burning on a quicker return interval, or I suggest it on some of these properties, because brood rearing habitat, especially in the Southeast, is typically one of the limiting factors. And so, like I said, fire is, you can manage your food plots to a point. Like you said, that might not be the best quality brood rearing, but it's brood rearing habitat anyways. But you can only put so much of your property in food plots, right? And so but now pine woods, which we're dealing with down here, if I can create 10-acre blocks or sections or 50-acre or whatever it is of brood rearing habitat throughout that entire stand, it's just, you can just impact more acres for cheaper on the dollar, in my opinion, than a food plot. But to circle back to your food plot thing, I always recommend people to let them go fallow in that late in summer, because it does provide that. Even like your cereal grains, like typically what I would recommend is 50 pounds per acre of some awnless wheat cereal grain, and then come through with a 15 pound per acre crimson clover. Is what I like to use, because it senesces also during the spring, so it seems like it attracts means it flowers out, so it attracts a lot of insects that time of year. You've got your cereal grain, which has got some growth on it and providing that bugging habitat. Like, you'll watch them pick the seeds off, pick the bugs off those.
And even sometimes stripping those seeds, I've noticed.
Yep. And so, that's if you are going to go for a food plot route, I think a lot of times just hitting it with a winter disc and using some herbicide to try to get more of that native forbaceous cover. I think you get more cover, more insects that way. But you know how people are, they want food plots. They want. So if you're going to do it for turkeys, that's kind of what I recommend. And then not to mow. That would be the prescription. So
we're going to stop for a quick break, but please don't go anywhere. We got so much to come.
A wingman flies close with unwavering dedication. At Folds of Honor, a wingman stands with families of America's fallen or disabled heroes. The burial flag given to their grieving family is folded 13 times. As a wingman, your $13 monthly donation provides scholarships to their spouses and children. 13 folds, $13. Become a wingman. Join today at foldsofhonor.org. Spandau Arms was founded with a simple idea: The best part of hunting isn't the gear, it's the memories. From the first rooster rise of the season in the tall grass to the last second opportunity on the target buck as sunset closes in. Spandau believes firearms should be built to perform, priced to be accessible, and designed to become an essential piece of your hunting story. Their lineup includes field-ready shotguns and precision-driven rifles built for hunters, competitors, and recreational shooters who know that quality and dependability matter more than the hype. Born from the experience of American hunters and crafted by generations of gunmakers, each Spandau firearm is built for real-world performance in the moments that matter.
Hopefully there were some tidbits in there from a habitat management perspective, but like I told you, we could, I could spend.
Bro, and that's what I mean, this is a complete turkey nerd out deal, and that's what I wanted this to be. And obviously I know we're appealing to a certain audience. Obviously, you know, we love turkey hunting. A lot of our audience loves turkey hunting, and you're right. The passionate turkey hunter, you don't find many turkey hunters once they are hooked on it.
Oh yeah,
this part of it comes naturally. It's no different than the duck hunters. You know, whether it's wood duck, whether it's greenheads, it doesn't matter if it's the quail hunter. Like you look at what they're doing down in Thomasville, Georgia, and North Florida, what they do for quail. Which obviously that's kind of cool because it kind of goes. What's good for the quail is good for the turkey, it seems. But
yeah, most of the time, quail typically, and I've just started to realize this morning. There's not a ton of research out there. I think I've heard of some proposed research that's going to start looking at kind of the benefits of managing for just turkey or just quail. But to your
would be interesting.
But to your point, like on most of those quail plantations or places that are managed just for quail, you see healthy turkey populations, and I don't. Yeah. Most of the time, and I don't think that's not lost because, like I was saying earlier, a baby turkey is essentially a quail. And so, yeah, if you're managing, you got brood fields, which typically all those places do brood fields for their quail. They're also going to be used by turkeys. But there is a slight difference where I think quail folks will manage a little bit more for shrub cover or just thicker cover in general. Like really good quail plantations isn't just all grass. Like it's got more grass forbs, but also shrubs. And what you'll see is sometimes that'll get so thick that a hen can't move through it. But from a quail's perspective, because that shrub cover is bare underneath, right? And so the little quail birds can move through that and navigate it.
You're talking a foot off the ground.
Exactly. Yeah, that kind of cover, like really thick. Where a turkey, an adult turkey can't walk through that stuff because it's so thick. Now the poults can escape under there, and having some of that cover is good for turkeys. But I do think you can, if like some of the hardcore people that are like cover, and I know them and I see the places, they still have turkeys and turkeys are doing well. But if I was managing it specifically for turkeys, I would back some of that shrub off, and I would just burn it at different times of the year, maybe use herbicide. There was just different strategies I would take.
And their idea, I'm sure, would be to keep that shrub cover to help take from aerial predation or hawks.
For quail, it's better. In my opinion, the areas that are like that are thick and have a lot of cover. They've got also a lot more wild quail.
I got a question I've always thought was really intriguing, and two things to take away that I've naturally, and at the time certainly didn't know the biology side of why. But there's two things when I've ever been invited to come turkey hunt. Two places I've always quick to say yes if I have time would be if somebody's got cattle country and they're like, hey man, I got a lot of turkeys, and like, well, where's your property? Like, man, we're cattle ranchers. It's always like there seems somehow that correlation between turkeys and cattle work. The pastures, and obviously it seems even, I mean, you see those adult turkeys flipping those cow patties. There's always bugs and worms and just something picking through the grain out of a cow patty. You see that, and then the way the habitat and the cover is it seems those cow pastures just outside the fence, they got thick areas, and then they still got the bare ground, and you see those turkeys working those fence lines. So I've always knew that if somebody invites me and they got cattle country, chances are they probably got some good gobbling turkeys. Number two has always been quail plantations, especially South and North Florida. They always just seem a little bit to coincide. I thought that was some really insightful information you gave on the little bit. Specifically, if you want to take it,
I'm taking it to the next level.
Me too.
Let's be honest.
I love quail, and that's something I do want to talk a little bit about quail before we get out of here. But one other interesting thing I've observed, I've been out, and I know you've done a lot of work and study out in, say, the Dakotas, South Dakota, that Wyoming area, Devil's Tower, and one thing that blew my mind is their hatch rate seems to be phenomenal every year. I mean, not every year, but all they need is one good year and it comes back in a year, it seems like, or maybe 2 years. If you have a good, all of a sudden you got 30 jakes running around these properties out there. And it will be so cold that where I'm thinking, I don't even want to hunt turkeys. And these turkeys are walking through the snow. You see it up in Minnesota. Why is it that those Merriams, is it the species, is it the habitat? Because to me, it seems brutal for a turkey, but they seem to thrive. That Black Hills area and some of those areas, it's crazy how they can turn around. Well, you would think the South would be the easiest place to raise a turkey.
Yeah, I think predator indexes are some of it. And I personally haven't done research in that part of the world, but there has been turkey research out there. Chad Lehman out of South Dakota has done a bunch of research out there, and I'm familiar with some of his work. And yeah, to your point, you typically see higher nest success, a little bit higher brood survival, and I think some of that's predator related. But yeah, it is also. But in those populations, and that's why. That's what I was talking about earlier. Geographically, it's totally different. Like when you go to the north and you have to deal with harsh winters, these birds. I mean, some of these birds, to your point, I mean, you'll hear stories. Bill Porter used to do a bunch of research up in that area too, and looking at the impacts of winter. And you'll have people have observations where turkeys won't leave the tops of trees because the snow's so deep. They'll just fly tree to tree for weeks. Like they'll literally just hop up in the tops of trees and pick on berries or buds or whatever they can get, and that puts them at a disadvantage from a body condition standpoint. Like I was talking about going into reproduction. And it is, but yeah, I think it just goes to show like how much also of the generalist species turkeys are. Like they can live in a lot of different environments. And whether, to your question about, species or Merriams, did they evolve differently to live in those situations? I think being a little bit of a bigger bird, you hear, longer legs, bigger toes, like higher elevation, colder things, kind of, you typically see that in those species. I think that definitely helps. Whereas, you go to Florida and you got the Osceola, it's a very small turkey. But just kind of the differences that you see there. But yeah, exactly as to why the fluctuations occur, differently in those populations is, I think it's just the environment that they live in. But yeah, I think it also is kind of tells you just how hardy turkeys are as well. Like it's hard to be a turkey, but they can make it work.
There was one study I'd heard a little bit about that you conducted or was part of where y'all had GPS and was talking about turkey hunting pressure, I think it was.
Oh, yeah. I've done a lot of that.
Man, explain a little bit of that because I found that very intriguing.
So that was part of my master's research, and I continued some of that during my dissertation, doing my doctoral research. But yeah, at the Webb Center in the Low Country of South Carolina, that's where I did my master's research. That was a really unique place where we trapped turkeys very successfully, had a bunch of turkeys with transmitters on them. But also you had to sign in every single morning there. And so I sat there at the check-in station with a box of transmitters and asked hunters if they'd be willing to take one with them, and go out there and you hunt with a GPS so that I could see those
movements in correlation with turkeys that had been trapped and released.
Absolutely.
So you had the hunters with a transmitter and a turkey with a transmitter.
Correct. And so we did that for 4 years there. There was actually a master's student after me, Elena Garrett, who she published some of that stuff. Obviously, I was on the work as well. But essentially what we found, Michael, is that pressure does, dictate their movements, but it typically is short-lived, especially on these heavily hunted WMAs, meaning like you get a huge influx of people the first couple weeks. Turkeys typically avoid those heavily hunted areas, which on those WMAs, secondary roads, things like that, because people are... like anything, we want the path of least resistance. The majority of your hunters park a truck at a gate, walk down a 2-track or fire break or a road and hit on their mouth yelper. Well, the turkeys key in on that stuff, and they key in on the cars and the doors, and so they start to just push deeper. But what we see is that they also, from like a movement perspective, that only happens very briefly. Like it seems like it's kind of like a shock to them. It's like 5 days. They act differently than they were prior to the hunters being there, but then they kind of settle down, and also hunters aren't out there as much after the first 2 weeks. Like that particular place, like we would hand out the vast majority of our GPS units the first 2 weeks. I think like something like 70% of the hunting pressure was in the first 2 weeks out there. And so once that subsides, then so the turkeys kind of go back to doing their whole thing. But yeah, man, another topic like habitat where I could sit here and talk for hours just about hunting pressure and how it influences turkey behavior, not only males, just females. That was kind of like bigger landscape stuff that we looked at, but also looked at like known interactions. So like how do turkeys behave, once they've encountered a hunter and don't die? Like what happens like when they bump them, whether they're sitting. And typically what we see is that turkeys do a fleeing behavior, like no shock, right? It's like, oh crap, we got to get out of here. And so they would flee away from the area and then kind of hunker down for a while. So it would be like get away, but then slow our movements.
Find a safe haven.
Yeah, slow our movements down, kind of take it in, instead of just kind of like leave and dodge. Like I think a lot of times you hear people, it's like, when I spook one or booger them, it's like, you see the fleeing behavior and like,
you just think they're
they're 5 miles and
they're not.
Typically speaking, now obviously you have outliers, but typically speaking, they don't go that far and then they hunker down. And so, whereas compared to like I had, this is different study, but I lumped some of that data in, was looking at how coyotes, so we had the coyotes with collars on it as well, how they impacted after a direct encounter with turkeys. And pretty much what you saw is that from a time perspective, they didn't mind. Like
they didn't mind.
They didn't flee. So you'd see them come together and they might avoid each other, but it wasn't like, hey, I need to get 500 meters away right away. They kind of just went about their business.
Similar, I guess the hypothesis would be that turkeys look at the hunting pressure no different than a bobcat or coyote to a degree, meaning they get out, get a safe haven, but then they come, but basically they get back to normal until the next encounter. Not that they completely forget, but it does change the landscape.
Oh yeah.
But they don't necessarily just leave. Otherwise, then they're having to look at hunting pressure or a hunter no different than they would look at a bobcat or coyote to a degree.
Yep. And some of them do. Like you see them, like you do see a reaction where it's like, okay, this is a lot of pressure. It's been pressured a lot. I
can't get back to normal.
I'm going to the private, or like or I'm getting out on the edges. Not that that's not hunted either, because in the Southeast, it's hard to find a place that isn't turkey hunted. I'll be honest.
Oh, I was going to say, I always laughed at some of the public versus private. I know some private ground that's probably hunted harder than some of the public even. Like the guys that love hunt turkeys, and whether they guide on them or have guests in, they hunt them pretty much every day. It might be a couple thousand acres. Yeah, but they're on there.
Or even some of these leases. I've never personally been on a lease like the ones I've heard stories about. But yeah, you might have a couple 1,000-acre lease, but if you got 10 guys and you're all turkey hunters, and boy, you can beat a place up pretty quick with hunting pressure on a private piece too.
That's a cool research base too on what you found, because I have found even in hunting, sometimes I found after turkey hunting gets tougher, and maybe where there's pressure, whether it's just stages of the turkey based on their vocalization or being able to manipulate them with a call or however you decide to hunt them, I found that sometimes these private ground that gets hunted a lot, maybe it's a lease, I've catch myself like, man, let's go over here to this WMA, because all the diehard people, the dieharders have leases and they have places, they're taking trips. But you almost forget that you got 3,000 acres WMA, but you look, it's middle of May. Well, it was hunted hard in early March.
Yeah.
But now these turkeys are less pressured even on public than they would have been on a private sector. So there's also a little bit I've seen of disillusion or disinformation of where people thought that, I will say overall, a hard hunted public WMA is harder to kill a turkey than, say, if you were to say, come here. Even if the turkeys ain't working, I can pretty much set you in a couple places and give it a couple hours every day and have no turkey knowledge. You got a chance of killing a turkey.
Yeah.
But the old run and gun style, some of those WMAs set up, like somebody hunts public a lot and knows this to be true. They're like, shut up, Waddell. Don't give away our secrets. But later in the season, some of these WMAs turn on crazy. And that goes right along with the research you found. The hunters are gone. All right, got my butt kicked. I done scared the turkeys away. I've shot and missed. And I had 30 people in here pounding these turkeys, and then all of a sudden 30 people turns into maybe 2 or 3 on 5,000 acres. But the stage is different. It's in May now. It's in Georgia, and just less people are chasing these turkeys on the public. The non-serious people didn't have private. They got their fill of it for a week, and they're out.
Yeah. And I was speaking about movement behavior, and obviously there's gobbling behavior in there as well, which I've done a ton of research on.
That's interesting to know. Okay. Yeah.
And so and I get why a lot of people get frustrated on public ground, because from a gobbling perspective, man, it's like you got the first 2 weeks and then it tanks. Like it tanks on these WMAs. But to your point, there are certain areas on the landscape. Like I wrote a paper essentially looking at the temporal trends, because we have units out. So actually, I guess I'll describe to listeners a little bit of how we know about gobbling activities. That we've got acoustic recorders essentially hanging in trees that record all ambient sound throughout the spring, and then we pull out all the gobbles using software. And so I know certain trees or certain areas, I know what the gobbling activity is in there. So on the WMA question, I was curious about is okay, we see this temporal trend across the WMA as a whole where once hunting season starts, 2 weeks into it, it drops off, right? It tanks. On an unhunted population just down the road or a couple miles away, they're still going strong. So it's a hunting related thing. It's the pressure. It's the pressure and also the removal, right? There's 3 different ways. A dead turkey doesn't gobble anymore, so there's going to be less gobbling inherently. But yeah, some of that's moving away from areas, and then also some of that's a behavioral change, which I'm currently working on a paper right now where those birds are still there. They're just less likely to gobble. The probability of hearing them on a given morning, before the season, it might have been 50%. Now this isn't published, so I'm just throwing out numbers. Before the season, it might be 50%. Hey, if there's a tom right here, you got a 50% chance of hearing him. He's going to gobble 50% of the mornings, and he's not going to gobble the other 50. Now you throw in hunting to the mix. Same bird, you're only going to hear him a quarter of the mornings. He's just choosing to gobble less because of hunting pressure. Now that same turkey on the unhunted ground, it's a 50% probability throughout the remainder of the season. So we also know it's not just removal, it's not just movement behaviors, but it's also some of them are making a choice to gobble less after the pressure. And so that makes them harder to hunt. And I think that's why people get frustrated on the public ground. But to your point, you can still find turkeys late in the year gobbling, and kind of one of the papers that I looked at was, where does that exist? So where on the landscape? Because what I noticed was there were certain areas that just held stronger for longer in the season, and typically, to no surprise, that was areas farther away from public access points and closer to private property.
That makes sense.
So it's a pressure thing too, right? They're not But with that being said, I've also, I can recall. In Georgia, I think it was my second year. There's been 2019, last day of the season. I was handing out 100 GPS units there. It wasn't nearly as successful because they didn't have to check in every morning. It was one of those WMAs you could check in on your phone. You could sign in at the beginning and go. But I'd catch stragglers, or I had some repeat customers, I would call them, that were just interested in the research and wanted to take a GPS. And the check station's right. I won't give out what check station it was or what WMA it was, but right in the heart of the WMA, last day of the season. And at the time, my wife and I, she wasn't my wife then, we were in the process of looking at places in Athens to buy. And so I'll never make this mistake again, but I took all my hunting stuff because we were going to meet the realtor that morning. I took all my hunting stuff out of the truck. Last day of the season, I hadn't heard a turkey gobble on that WMA in a week. And I was just like, whatever, took all my stuff out. I'm handing out 100 GPS units that morning. I got the door open to the check station. Pow! Right. Within 100 yards across from the check station, one of the heaviest
right on the highway.
Right, one of the heaviest hunted WMAs I've ever seen. But I'm telling you, burning it down. Burning it down. I got no guns, no calls, no nothing, no one to tell. And it's just so there are those anomalies, and they do. There are certain areas on the landscape, and birds are still gobbling at the end of the season.
And that same research that you found with the hunting pressure, could that add some salt to the theory that I hear a lot of people say in these heavy predator-ridden properties where bobcats and coyotes, still a good bit of turkeys, where I've heard a lot of old-timers say, yeah, these turkeys ain't gobbling as much because there's more coyotes and bobcats out there. Could that still add some theory to that to be true, to where turkeys on the ground gobble a little less? Because obviously a predator's a predator.
Sure. I think yes, but we haven't measured it. So my mind went right there too with the coyote stuff. So I'm like, okay, well I've got a bunch of coyotes collared. I know where their hot spots are, so to speak, right? Where they like to spend the vast majority of their time. And then I also have all these sound recorders across the landscape. So my thought process was I should, in theory, see correlation with, if that was true, this is all hypothesis, I would expect that those hot spots, you would see decreases in gobbling activity in those areas. And I didn't.
You didn't. That's
I'm not saying that there's not some validity to that hypothesis. I'm just saying the way I went about testing it in that scenario, there was no evidence suggesting that that occurred. And I think one of the things I learned with the GPS collars with the coyotes and the males is they definitely interact, right? Like they're on the landscape, they interact, but I don't know if it's really as frequent as we think. From like a temporal aspect, a coyote activity, mostly hunting at night, first thing in the morning, first thing. I mean, they're also moving throughout the day, and there's I say contacts when they meet turkeys then. But really, like when you take the GPS points and you overlay them on a map, you're like, holy smokes, man! These coyotes and turkeys are like amongst each other. Like they're living together. They are definitely on the landscape, in which they are. But when you really start, nailing it down from a temporal aspect, and then from a habitat patch perspective, not overlapping as much as you would think.
It's funny. I've heard that theory about the predation and the turkeys gobbling. I was one to where I'm sure I'm going to aggravate somebody. I never truly agreed with that because so many times I would hear the same. I would hear coyotes make turkey gobble. They shot gobbling at the coyotes, which I'm sure on your acoustical analysis you found the same. To where same with the barred owl. I always find it unique that we sit there, in the morning, and there's no doubt I'm sure owls will eat a poult. Remember the video?
They'll eat. Great horned owls will predate
Them are some killers,
adults. Dude. So here's a nugget I'll throw.
But they gobble at an owl.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It's almost like they still live together, but they still got to be arch enemies.
Well, and how many? I mean, you've spent a lot of time in the field, and you've spent a lot of time turkey hunting. So I know you've seen coyotes come into your decoys probably and all that. But
absolutely.
How often have you also observed turkeys in a field with a coyote and them just going about their business?
A lot.
All the time.
A lot.
That's what I try to tell people. Like, coyotes get a bad rep, and they do. Like I said, they can get poults, they can get nests, but there's a lot out there after a turkey. And I think, as long as a turkey can see a coyote, right? His number one defense from a turkey is visual. If they can see, they feel fine, because at the end of the day they can fly.
Yes.
So it's like, they'll get out of Dodge. But
well, it seems like a lot of these animals, everything's so opportunistic. We are opportunistic. Where do you eat lunch? It's probably the local cafe that's got a good cheeseburger or chicken wings, and you go there. It doesn't mean that you don't decide to go an hour one day and drive to lunch in a city close by. Most of the time it's going to be a date lunch with your wife, to where I'm going to take her somewhere other than the Dairy Queen or something. But inevitably I've noticed that, and I know, like, I feed protein to my deer. Mm-hmm. Well, what ends up hanging a lot around those protein feeders, and I do trap them, is coons and possums.
Oh, yeah.
Getting the residuals of those corn, that protein. And I've often had this idea in my head, like, especially if it's in April and May and I see a coon, I'm thinking to myself, well, if that coon is eating protein, so less likely he's probably fat and happy and probably going to crawl up a tree and probably not going to be out wandering around looking for a nest.
Yeah.
So I've often wondered, I've always had these mad scientists, I call it redneck biology, where I'm thinking, well, I'm not saying that at the same token, I don't hunt turkeys around those protein feeders, because technically it would be illegal, because those turkeys will eat protein. So it is a bait. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, your laws, you can stay certain distance from them. But then obviously I also realized too, well, that turkey that gets used to coming has got more opportunity to get caught by a bobcat coming to be blinded by, no different than, like, I used to always plant chufa every year, and I still do, just because I enjoy plowing dirt, like you said,
Sure.
the cold beer and the hot day and tractor time. I love it. It's therapy.
Nostalgia.
But man, every chufa field I've ever had, man, it's a turkey magnet. It's probably the best turkey natural bait that you can plant and legally hunt.
Agreed.
That I found. But there's never been a time, if it wasn't every year, it was every other year, I'd find a pile of feathers where no doubt a bobcat, because in my mind, that bobcat has realized, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I don't think they're smart enough to say this is a chufa seed, these turkeys or whatever.
Yeah.
But they finally realized, like, man,
They pattern them.
they'll be laying in the briar patch.
Yes.
And they always seem, and it always feels that it's a gobbler they catch. And I always pictured the turkey strutting around and just can ambush them. And obviously, to me, a bobcat is just one of the most efficient predators I've ever seen.
No doubt. And I don't have any data to back up that they're the large player in adult, mortality in turkeys. I don't have the data to say that. But boy, I just think they're more designed to kill turkeys than a coyote is. You think about coyotes, pack hunters running around, more opportunistic, bump into something. A bobcat's calculated. To your point, it's an ambush predator. So it's going to sit and wait and pattern something.
Way more patience than what we would have, or certainly like a coyote to me, like I agree, I trap them, and I always, when I take a coyote off my property, I'm thinking, okay, maybe I saved a turkey, possibly saved some eggs, possibly saved some fawns. I certainly feel like I saved a fawn because I know that the research shows those coyotes do eat fawns a lot in those denning times of year. But I also realized, or not the denning time of years, but when they fawning, well, it's there. But I've often thought, if I can easily pattern a turkey on a field, and I'm chubby, but not because I'm eating turkey every day. It's because there's little Debbie's in my cupboard. I don't have to eat this. But I'm also using my wood knowledge and pattern deer and turkey. If I can do that, a bobcat that's out there on a 30-degree night, he has to figure out a pattern. And so in one case, I've always felt like the less patternable certain things are, probably the less the predation is. Again, this is completely just
but like I said earlier, our research backs that up from a predictability standpoint. Yeah, males who are predictable are more likely to get predated.
Yes,
that's our data suggests that, and
it also makes sense when you describe what the coyotes will do in predation, to where they're certainly opportunistic. The wet turkey syndrome, the wet turkey hypothesis, I think that's the correct way to say it. Makes sense, because I know when I trap coyotes, I'll put in a roadway, I might have 7 traps down a 2-mile stretch. And so in my thought process, I've actually put trail cameras on my traps, and a coyote will walk by and go by this trap and completely just trotting through. I call it, they're ratting, they're just running. And if they smelled something, they stop and curious, and then run by this trap and have a trail camera down here, and all of a sudden hit that, and maybe it's a north wind blowing, like, whoa, and they stop in their tracks. Maybe I don't catch them that time, but they'll come back. It's almost like as smart as they are, where a bobcat, to me, is easier to catch in a trap than a coyote. A bobcat, the first time he comes down the road, he don't miss that dirt hole. He really don't miss it. You might not catch him, but he's like, dude, I am hungry. I was out here trying to eat something. There is some rotten, probably tasty meat in this hole, and I catch him, And so in my mind, you might think the coyote's smarter, but they seem to hunt a little bit more with just trotting along, and there's something to eat. Persimmon. Oh, there it is. Okay. There's a rat just running across the road. Oh, I smell a rat. I smell a rabbit. And so anyway, a lot of this stuff, I don't have scientific data other than just wood knowledge of taking observations from a desire to hunt. But
hey, but it's hard to, that in and of itself, like spending time in the woods, like research is great and putting statistics and numbers to everything, but it all starts in the field. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
It's people, and like, that was my, I learned so much when I was, 8 months of the year, I was in the field tracking these things throughout their life cycle. And like, hunting, you get those experiences as well, right? Like, maybe not as much as I would in a single year, but I also try to selfishly hunt a bunch because I love to do it, but also hunting, I don't think I can manage this bird or claim to be a turkey researcher and not spend time in the woods chasing them with a shotgun either, because there's also so much to learn in that aspect.
You learn
as
a
well.
lot of it,
so
yeah.
I talk to people like yourself all the time, and they're like, well, I don't have any data, and I don't have any data. This is redneck. And I'm like, well, that's data in and of itself. You just haven't put statistics to it, or you don't have it, like you can't back it up. But those observations, I never remiss those. Like talking to the older
yes.
generation, you come across the guy that's, in his 70s or 80s, and I have some of these people reach out to me and like, hey, I want to talk to you about what I've seen in my life from turkeys. I never turn that opportunity down,
right?
Because it's the experience of being in the woods. You can't replace that.
That
either.
is one reason I'm so thankful and so just impressed with you. Number one, at your age and the dedication you've had, but knowing you come from a hunting background, there has been times I have been pretty critical on certain biologists, but I find myself, and I come back and I think about the ones I've been more critical on, what I will find is those particular biologists are not rooted into the hunting culture. And so with that, I don't throw shade. I just have more confidence in from somebody who grew up that had a desire to fill a tag, certainly in conservation, certainly not as an habitual abuser of our wildlife and fisheries. But there's something that naturally fits with the academia that you've learned at, in New York to Louisiana to Georgia, and all the studies you've done abroad from out west to working with other biologists. To me, I have had more in common with a biologist like you, other than possibly somebody who is more leaning side of the PETA biologist. Now, probably not a lot of those, but there are some. And so I just find that the knowledge that you have through hunting as a biologist and the academia that comes through studying these OGs like Collier and Chamberlain, to me, that's why I'm thankful NWTF has you, that we have you. NWTF don't have you, we have you, because, again, this could easily be probably the longest podcast I've ever done, because you hit right in the wheelhouse of what I drive my wife crazy about when I have Philip Culpepper call me, or Salter, or even these OG turkey hunters that also in their own way have evolved into their own understanding of brood habitat, nesting habitat. What can I do? What can I plant? What can I do to better the resource? Obviously, if you're helping a turkey, chances are you don't know what. You're probably helping a certain species of butterfly, another bug, or the forage or the landscape or the geography. There's so much that goes into it. And so our desire to hunt, to use some of this meat for table fare, to be able to enjoy it with our kids, with our wives, and then you add the academia of understanding potential disease, potential of what is it like for turkeys to live around maybe poultry houses, and what is it that could be disadvantage of maybe using chicken manure to fertilize a field. I've heard that theory. I don't know. You guys are digging into stuff all the time, trying to find out a true factual cause. And but as we're getting kind of closer to closing this out, from your perspective of you being a hunter and a biologist and a diehard researcher of trying to figure out what betters the habitat, specifically in this case for turkeys, what are a few things in a couple paragraphs that you would advise people who own property that they could do, they could add, whether it's supplemental food, whether it's habitat, whether it's predator control? What are a few things that you would recommend?
Yeah.
Without seeing the property and just saying, hey, man, if you do these things, you can help your percentages.
Using some of those techniques I talked about from a habitat management perspective, I'm of the belief that habitat is king. I've seen even in the Southeast where, you hear about declines and you hear about turkeys in peril. There's also turkey populations that are doing just fine. And I work with landowners that have plenty of turkeys. And I think the common theme between all of those places are they have habitat. And so I think creating that habitat, using some of those techniques I briefly touched on earlier, but there's plenty of resources out there online now that you can get answers about habitat management and turkey management. And making sure that you got brood rearing habitat close to nesting cover. I think the more brood rearing and nesting cover you have intermixed across your property, and the less they have to travel to find those things, the less likely they are going to encounter a predator. And I think you'll have increases in population. And then something that we also talked about is just be mindful of how many it's hard to count turkeys. It's hard to know how many there are, especially given that, like I said, the acreage is 2,000 to 3,000 acre home ranges. You might only be able to hunt 60 acres and you don't know what your neighbors have or what. Just try to be mindful of how many birds you have and how many you're killing. Just like I said earlier, there is a conservation aspect of this, and I think earlier you were looking for the word sustainability.
Yeah,
we
right.
just want to do it sustainable, right?
That's
like
correct.
we just want to make sure that we're harvesting, and so if you've got 4 times, maybe shoot one. You'd be pushing it, shooting 2. Like don't feel like you got to get angry at them and go in there and wipe them out. I think you can shoot yourself into a hole and you can come out of it, but it's much harder once you do that and the population gets lower. So yeah, those kind of 2 things to me are important. And then support local conservation. Agencies, get involved with your local NWTF chapter or any other conservation, organizations that, it only costs $35 or a member or $50 to go have a dinner, but we're using those dollars to leverage research that we're talking about or putting habitat on the ground. Because at the end of the day, not everybody has the ability to go out and turn a piece of dirt or light a match. But everybody can go get involved. Like, and if you're a turkey hunter, I would encourage you to make sure you're doing something to help turkeys as well as take them. And I think those are kind of, we could go in the weeds, but I think as a synopsis, that's kind of where my mind goes. Do the habitat work, enjoy it, go out, harvest the birds, make sure you're doing it in a sustainable manner. And I think the rest will take care of itself, so to speak. As long as you're paying attention to the populations, trying to encourage growth, and being mindful of what you have and what you're taking, think you
leave more than you take.
Yeah,
for
just
sure.
leave more than you take. That's all I ask that for my kids. I ask that for everybody. And I mean, and to your point in the hunter, and I don't, you mentioned my hunting background and how important that is for research, and I think it is. It's important to have people that don't have a hunting background as well, different perspective, different minds. But to me, it's extremely important from a hunting perspective, is because the people I'm communicating to are the hunters. And how do I communicate to a hunter if I'm not one? And it's why I got interested in it to begin with. But also, it's people should know that the reason why this bird is mostly still on the landscape today is because of the backs of hunters. And that's with a lot of game species, and that's what people don't understand, is that, through PR dollars, which is the Pittman-Robertson tax, anytime we buy hunting-related items or shooting-related items, 12% of that is taxed and goes to the federal government, and then goes directly back to conservation, doing research, making jobs like mine possible. And so the hunters are who cares. It's hard for people to grasp that at times, right? It's like, well, you guys are out there, you're killing, you're removing. But hunters are some of the most passionate conservationists as well. And off the backs of our dollars, we've saved species. And I believe the turkey is one of them. Hunters have their place, because without them, and it also grows people's interest in the outdoors. It's harder than ever right now to get people outside and interested in the outdoors. There's just so many competing things, whether it's sports, video games, this, that, and the other. Hunting is an opportunity for that social release, like you talked about, that stress release. And that, I think in this day and age, man, it's important to have that. It's so important to have that. And so hunting, and turkey hunting in particular, I think is one of the best ways to do that. So.
It is. And two, like you mentioned on the Pittman Act, where a lot of that goes back in the federal government. And I hope that there's some politician, I doubt it, but I hope there is, that's listening. Yes, and you guys be accountable for our dollars and all the fraud and stuff, and know that there's thousands and thousands, actually millions of hunters out there that we want this, used appropriately, not being frauded off our back. And so you're exactly right. If you look at organizations like the National Wild Turkey Federation, I know Turkeys for Tomorrow just recently been established. They seem to be doing good work. Y'all somewhat seem to be working together. And if you look at where the money comes from, it's not coming from PETA. I don't think PETA members are sitting around shelling butter beans trying to figure out how to save a turkey, even though they just don't want us to kill another one. They're not really looking at it from that aspect. I can say some of these things where I sit, maybe not you, from where you and what you do with NWTF, and I know it does get political, but I can say it from where I sit because hunters do work hard. Yes, they do hunt. Yes, they do take a turkey. Their kids kill a turkey. Their wives kill turkeys. Some of these wives, their husband kills a turkey. Sometimes the wives are getting husbands involved. But at the end of the day, man, we love it, and it's coming off the backs of hunters. Our desire to have more and sustain, and have the other generations, beyond us have that opportunity to hunt and to have it better than what we had it. And I've started to see that everything seems to be, you have the ebbs and flows. There's places that had turkeys that don't have as many. But what I found unique in the social media whining about the time that you looked at this area that was riddled with turkeys, that's taking a hit right now for whatever reasons, that biologists and researchers like you are trying to dig into it. Is it disease? Is it habitat? Is it predator? Is it overkill, overharvest? Then you find out this area that didn't have turkeys, well, you find out like, dude, we got turkeys everywhere. I find that unique. Now, I'm blessed the fact that I get to experience it because I get to travel the country. Correct. I'm seeing places and getting invitations and opportunities to hunt places that never had turkeys, and it's virgin hunting to them, and there's turkeys everywhere. Then there's places that were Old school, like you hear the stories of Kansas, that they was riddled with turkeys or had turkeys everywhere, and some places took a hit. Same in the Southeast. As a kid, there was turkeys seemed to be gobbling everywhere in the early 80s. Now it's a little bit more finicky, but I've noticed on my place that I've had a chance to control, to a degree, manipulate. I've got more turkeys than I've ever had. And so one is, I don't think any of us are trying to be hubris or godlike, but I do think it being responsible and seeing what you can make a difference. Is it catching 5 or 6 coons off your, is it adding a good prescribed burn? Is it adding better, not just nesting habitat, but that brood habitat, like you were talking about, where the turkeys can brood and get through and stuff like that? And last question I wanted to ask you about, and since we've been primarily just talking about turkeys, which I knew that's what this would be, and that's what I was excited about because I love turkeys. But in your theory, what happened to the quail? Like when in the 80s, I'm on Dr. Patrick. Heck with that Patrick. I ain't.
Patrick's good.
I like Doctor, by God. If I went through the school and you do, I want everybody to call me Doc. But at the end of the day, when I was a kid in the late 70s, early 80s, I could just walk around in the fall during a season that quail was in, and I'd always flush wild cubby of quail. And I will say the habitat changed. Some of the forest practices had changed. But as any biologist, have they ever found what happened to the wild quail? Let's just specifically talk about the Southeast. They seem to be killing it in Texas right now. Quail everywhere out there.
Yeah.
In areas like down around that King Ranch. I got some buddies that are part owners in the 4.6s. And, man, I was out there this past spring, and I'd never seen that many quail.
Yep.
But the Southeast used to be like that.
Yeah.
What happened?
Habitat again, and I know it seems like I'm using that answer is a cop out, but I really think it is, and part of that reason is, like, to your point, it's still good in Texas, but you can still go to places in South Georgia and North Florida that have wild quail populations and
healthy wild quail,
unbelievable, populations, and a lot of that's through habitat management. Now, some of that's supplemental feeding and trapping as well, the whole gambit. But the reason why I think quail blinked out quicker is they're just not as much of a generalist species,
meaning
like turkeys can make it work in areas that they shouldn't. To your point, we were talking about that a little bit earlier, where you see turkeys where they shouldn't be, or you wouldn't perceive them to be there, but they're making it work for certain reasons.
Better to evolve, possibly. Is that safe to say?
Quail are they're more of a specific species. Like they need cover, they need fire, which there was a lot less fire on the landscape because of loblolly. Switching over from longleaf to loblolly, the loss of the longleaf pine system here in the Southeast absolutely correlates to declining in the quail population. And so I personally think that's what it is. It was habitat driven, and that bird was just more of a niche habitat niche species. Like, it needed very specific things to thrive, and we took those away. Whereas turkeys are buffered just a little bit more because they're a little bit more of a generalist. And I don't claim to be a quail expert by any stretch of the imagination. But I think most of the folks would share that sentiment. And yeah, hopefully Dr. James Martin agrees with me at UGA, because his office is right next to mine, and if I got that wrong, he's going to be pretty mad at me.
I'll be giving you a call. Well, man, Dr. Patrick Wightman, man, I like saying that. Dude, I can't tell you what a privilege it is to talk to you. Even more of a privilege to know you're working with NWTF. And for years, I've been a huge supporter of NWTF and so many of the local banquets to the national convention, which once again was a blowout of, when I say blowout in a good way, of just so much celebration of, the hunting heritage and just people in love with turkey hunting. If you was a lady there that was wanting to celebrate Valentine's Day, maybe you didn't have the experience you wanted because you heard a lot of fly down cackles and owl hoots and even geese and duck calls. But
no doubt,
at the end of the day, I'm very thankful that you're there working for us as hunters and getting us more research. I hope as we find more things, or you guys through y'all's research and what y'all find in the conclusion of some of these case studies y'all putting together, we can keep sharing this more. And that's why I love about these podcasts, even though this was completely, me and you both turkey nerded completely out. This was, for me, I learned a lot. And I think that's the other thing I would say is anybody listening, we always are learning. It's like as these turkeys, they're learning, they're evolving. We have to evolve with the times as well.
And oftentimes we're behind. and that,
we are behind.
And that stinks with science. I get that all the time. It's like people want answers now. And like in this day and age, especially, right, with social media, AI, everything, it's like we can get information at our fingertips and answers in a hurry. As scientists, it takes time to figure these complex situations out. And so it's a double-edged sword. Be patient. We're doing the work. We're trying to, help out the bird and conserve it, but it takes time. But yeah, to your point, that's one good thing about social media and the internet. One good thing is there's a lot of information out there right now, and you can find a lot of information out about turkeys now more so than ever. There's no doubt about it.
No doubt.
I would encourage the average hunter who hasn't dived into the research side of thing or listening to guys like Michael Chamberlain and his podcast or his Turkey Tuesdays or Brett Collier, what he's saying. There's so much to learn right now through that, and I would encourage people to do that.
Yeah, and also I'll add in closing too, if you get a chance, join the NWTF. And even though we're talking a lot in National Wild Turkey Federation, I used to get in trouble all the time because I'd say, NWTF, if you want it to stand for No Woman Too Fat, then let it be that. But I think it's obviously National Wild Turkey Federation. However, if you dig deeper, like I said, again, you can't say that. I can, but I laugh every time.
Kurt's skin's crawling. I can see the CEO of my boss.
I think there's a lot of guys somewhere that at least buy a $20, $25 hat just for they thinking that's what it stands for. It's pretty cool. But at the end of the day, too, man, there's so much more that the National Wild Turkey Federation's outside of just turkey, from deer to quail to elk to the Rocky Mountains to all of these things. So even though, yes, it's got turkey in the title, you guys.
Absolutely.
And
it stands for way more. I mean, the mission is the conservation of the wild turkey and the hunting heritage. And
that is why I love supporting that.
That second part is just as important as the first, as we just talked about. And so that is the mission. And I'm thankful for the for the National Wild Turkey Federation. I'm going to stop saying NWTF now after you dropping that nugget on me, man. You're going to drop that nugget on me. I'm going to stop using that. National Wild Turkey Federation, and I appreciate all the groundwork that's been laid for me to even have this opportunity, right? Like guys like James Earl Kennemer, the CEOs of the companies over the years, all the volunteers, all the staff. I think there's 200 to 300 employees in that organization. I'm the fortunate one to be able to come into this position now, but they've done all the work that's even made this position possible. You know what I mean? The fact that the NWTF in the last 4 years has invested $2 million into research directly, 35 different research projects, and when matched, it's up over 20 million. That's not lost on me, and I'm very fortunate. And so I'm excited for this time. I'm excited for how excited people are around turkey research and conservation now. I feel like it's going in a good direction, and I think together with the research and with that enthusiasm, we can make a difference for this bird.
Well, I can't thank you enough for your time, buddy, and continued success. You got my number. Please call me when y'all find anything. And please call me and Eddie Salter, too. If y'all ever measure a Jake foot versus an adult 2-year-old gobbler, let us know. Because, man, I'm dying to know more than Eddie. Probably won't change his opinion on it.
That's funny. I'll have to put that bug in a grad student's ear. Hopefully we get some data back on that about
that'd be fun to know.
Measuring middle toes. But, yeah, thanks for having me on here. Thanks for letting me, use your voice and your platform. I know you've always been an advocate for the wild turkey, and have always tried to raise funds for the NWTF, and I've watched that over my last 10 years being at the convention. I always see, you're there most of the time, and you're raising funds, and so I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate you having me on here.
Well, thank you, really man. That means a lot, and likewise, man. Well, happy hunting, happy research, and thank you, Dr. Patrick. I appreciate you coming on, and safe travels, and good luck the rest of the season finding research and bagging a few turkeys. And hope that young boy, how old's your boy now?
He's 3.5, so I don't think I'll get him. I don't know if I'll get him out this year, but I'm ready to enjoy the spring.
He about age you can put him in your turkey vest and say, be still, look over my shoulder.
We're going to go listen. I'll tell you that. He's going to hear his first turkey gobble this year. I got a feeling, but it might be a couple more years before he totes a gun. Well,
congratulations on the knucklehead, and I'm glad you're a Georgia resident, man. And is it Go Dogs yet, or is it?
Yeah, it's been Go Dogs. It was tough. I mean, obviously you get to LSU, they have success, win a national championship, and then I'm like, man, I'm an LSU fan now. But then I come to Georgia, they start having success and win national championships, and I'm a faculty member there, been a student there. It's like, yeah, they converted me. So yeah, it's and I've decided if I move and change places moving forward, I'm just go Dogs.
You might as well.
It's going to be Dogs.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Patrick. I appreciate it, buddy. And I can't wait to talk to you soon. Catch up later in the season.
Absolutely. Thank you.